I'd rather burn this place to the ground than marry you, Ethan Cole. Clara Hayes stood in the doorway of her family's trading post, rifle in hand, staring down the only man in Willow Ridge who dared challenge her independence. Behind her, shelves groaned under debt. Around her, whispers grew louder, stubborn woman, foolish pride, throwing away her only chance. But Clara had sworn an oath the day her mother died broken and defeated. Love would never weaken her. Yet Ethan didn't flinch. He never did. Stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The Wyoming wind carried dust and judgment in equal measure through Willow Ridge that autumn of 1882. Clara Hayes learned early that both could sting, but only one could be ignored. She stood behind the scarred oak counter of Hayes' trading post, tallying numbers that refused to add up no matter how many times she reworked them. 26 years old, unmarried, unfashionably sunbrowned, with calloused hands that could handle a rifle better than a teacup. The ledger before her told a story she already knew by heart. 3 months behind on supplier payments, winter stock dangerously low, and her father's medicine eating through what little profit they scraped together. The bell above the door chimed. Clara didn't look up. "We're closed," she said flatly. "Sign says open until 6. It's 5:30. That voice. Deep, patient, maddeningly calm. Clara's jaw tightened. "Then the sign's wrong, Ethan." Ethan Cole removed his hat, dust falling from the brim in a small cloud. He was built like the land itself, broad-shouldered, weathered, immovable. Dark hair touched with premature silver at the temples, eyes the color of creek water in spring, and a face that rarely smiled but somehow never looked cruel. "Need supplies," he said simply. "Wire, nails, lamp oil. Can wait if you're busy." "I'm always busy." Clara finally looked up, fixing him with the sharp green eyes that had stopped more forward men than Ethan in their tracks. "And you can get your supplies from Pritchard's, same as half the county does now." "Pritchard's prices are robbery." "Then I guess you'll just have to be robbed, because I don't have time to—" She stopped. Ethan had walked past the counter to the supply section, moving with the easy familiarity of someone who'd been coming here for years, which he had, every week like clockwork, buying supplies he probably didn't need, fixing things that weren't quite broken, lingering just long enough to test Clara's patience. "What do you think you're doing?" "Getting what I came for." He selected items methodically, checking quality with practiced hands. "Your wire's better than Pritchard's. Doesn't rust in the rain." "I don't recall giving you permission to— You're short on the 20-penny nails." Ethan's voice cut through her protest, matter of fact. "Got maybe 3 pounds left? I'll take 2. Leave you some for other customers." Clara's fingers tightened on her pencil. "I don't need you rationing my own inventory." "Didn't say you did. Just being considerate." He brought his selections to the counter, laying them out in a neat row. "Sarah Brennan was in yesterday complaining she couldn't find finishing nails anywhere in town. Figured you'd want to keep some on hand for folks who actually need them." It was the kind of casual observation that made Clara want to throw something. Ethan noticed everything, what she stocked, who bought what, which customers were struggling, which suppliers were reliable. He paid attention in a way that felt like invasion, like he was mapping the territory of her life without permission. $2.40, she said crisply. Ethan counted out exact change, his fingers briefly brushing hers as he placed the coins on the counter. Clara jerked her hand back as if burned. "Clara, don't." "I'm just going to, I know what you're going to do, Ethan. The answer is still no." A ghost of something, frustration, amusement, flickered across his face. "Haven't asked a question." "You don't have to. It's written all over you every time you walk through that door." Clara began wrapping his purchases with sharp, angry movements. "You think if you keep showing up, keep being helpful, keep waiting me out like I'm some stubborn horse that just needs the right trainer, eventually I'll— what? Fall into your arms? Realize I've been wrong all along? See that you're my last best chance at avoiding spinsterhood?" "Never thought any of those things?" Ethan's voice remained level, but something in his eyes had gone hard. "Thought maybe you could use a friend. Thought maybe running a business and caring for a sick father alone might be heavy enough without carrying pride on top of it. But I can see I was wrong." He picked up his wrapped supplies and turned toward the door. Clara felt something twist in her chest. Guilt, anger, she couldn't tell which. "Ethan, wait." He paused, hand on the door frame. I didn't mean, she forced the words out. Thank you. For your business. Come back anytime. It was the closest thing to an apology she could manage, and they both knew it. Ethan studied her for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice had gentled. Your father doing any better? No? The medicine helping? When I can afford it. He nodded slowly, processing this. If you ever need, I won't. The words came out harder than she intended. Whatever you're about to offer, I won't need it. We're managing fine. The lie hung between them, obvious and awkward. Right, Ethan said finally. Well, you know where to find me if that changes. After he left, Clara stood alone in the dimming store, surrounded by half-empty shelves and the weight of her own stubbornness. Through the window, she watched him ride away on that steady buckskin gelding, sitting straight in the saddle like a man who knew exactly where he belonged. She hated that about him. Hated his certainty, his patience, his absolute refusal to give up on something, someone who'd made it crystal clear she wasn't interested. But what she hated most was the small, traitorous part of herself that looked forward to Tuesday afternoons when the bell would chime and that familiar voice would say he needed supplies. Yet, the Hayes trading post had been her grandfather's dream, built with frontier optimism and gold rush money before either ran out. 3 stories of rough-hewn timber and ambitious planning, main floor for trade, second floor for storage, top floor converted to living quarters where Clara now cared for her father. Thomas Hayes had been a giant once, 6'4" of barrel-chested vitality, a man who could swing a sledgehammer for 10 hours and still have energy to dance with his wife at evening socials. Now he lay in a narrow bed, his frame wasted, skin paper thin, breathing like it cost him everything he had left. Clara climbed the stairs with her father's evening meal. Broth, bread, hope in a bowl. She'd gotten good at painting smiles over worry. There's my girl. Thomas's voice rattled like wind through dry grass. What's for supper? Let me guess. Your world-famous mystery soup? It's chicken broth, Papa. Same as yesterday. Mystery's what we're calling chicken now? Times are harder than I thought. She helped him sit up, adjusting pillows with practiced efficiency. How's the pain today? Manageable, which meant terrible. Thomas Hayes had never been a good liar. Store busy? Busy enough. Liar. But he smiled when he said it. I can hear it from up here, Clara. Used to be bells ringing all day. Now it's hours of quiet with the occasional customer wandering in out of politeness. Clara focused on the soup, unwilling to meet his eyes. People's habits are changing. Pritchard's built that new place on Main Street, closer to the saloon and hotel. It's convenient for travelers. Convenient, and he's undercutting our prices. We'll adjust, find new suppliers, offer goods he doesn't carry. With what money? Thomas's hand, when it closed over hers, felt like kindling wrapped in skin. Baby girl, I know what the ledgers say, probably better than you do, since you keep trying to hide them when I shuffle downstairs. Papa, let me finish. I'm dying, Clara. We both know it. Question is what happens after. Don't talk like that. Got to. He squeezed her hand with what little strength remained. This store can't support you alone. Inventory's shot, building needs repairs we can't afford, suppliers are losing faith. You need help. Clara pulled away, standing abruptly. I can manage. Managing isn't thriving. Hell, Clara, it's barely surviving. Thomas studied his daughter with eyes that had watched her grow from stubborn child to stubborn woman. Ethan Cole came by again, didn't he? Her silence was answer enough. That man's been circling you for 3 years now, patient as stone. Any woman with sense wouldn't mistake dependency for love. Clara's voice went cold. I watched it happen to Mama. Watched her shrink and fade until she was nothing but an extension of you. No thoughts of her own, no dreams, no fire, just a shadow who cooked and cleaned and died quietly while you were off proving you could drink every man in the territory under the table. The words landed like physical blows. Thomas flinched, closing his eyes. That's not fair, Clara. Isn't it? She was shaking now, years of buried resentment boiling over. She loved you so much she forgot to love herself. Forgot she used to paint, used to read poetry, used to have opinions that weren't just echoes of yours. And when the consumption took her, you fell apart, like you were the only one grieving, like I wasn't right there watching both my parents disappear. I know I failed her, failed you both. So you understand why I won't make the same mistake." Claire's voice dropped to something quieter, more dangerous. "I won't become someone's shadow. I won't love so hard I forget how to stand alone. And I won't marry Ethan Cole or any other man just because it's convenient or expected or the whole damn town thinks I should." Thomas was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice carried the weight of hard-earned wisdom. "Your mama didn't get weak because she loved me, Clara. She got weak because I was weak. Because I took and never gave back, never supported her, never saw her as anything but a comfort when I needed comforting." He met his daughter's eyes. "But that wasn't love. That was selfishness wearing love's mask. Real love, the kind that lasts, makes both people stronger." "There's no such thing." "You really believe that?" Clara looked away. "I have to." After her father drifted into fitful sleep, Clara returned downstairs to finish inventory. The numbers were even worse than she'd admitted. 3 months behind on payments meant suppliers would start demanding cash on delivery. Cash she didn't have. The store's reputation had kept them afloat this long, but reputation didn't pay bills. She was hunched over the ledger, calculating how many more months they could limp along, when she heard it, breaking glass. Clara grabbed the rifle she kept under the counter and moved toward the back storage room. The lock on the rear door hung broken, and through the doorway she could see figures loading boxes onto a cart. "Stop right there!" 3 men froze. She recognized them. Drifters who'd been hanging around Willow Ridge's seedier establishments, the kind of men who viewed a woman alone as opportunity rather than obstacle. The biggest one, a gap-toothed brute named Carver, grinned. "Well now, thought you'd be upstairs with your dying daddy. This is awkward. Put the boxes back." "Or what? You gonna shoot all 3 of us before we take that gun away?" Carver took a step forward. "Here's how this works, sweetheart. We take what we came for, you pretend you slept through the whole thing, everyone's happy." Clara cocked the rifle. "Next step you take is your last." Big talk from a woman who's never shot anything more dangerous than a rabbit. But Carver's advance slowed. Even cowards respected loaded guns. "Tell you what, give us the rifle, throw in whatever cash you got, and maybe we don't burn this tinderbox down with you and your pa inside." Her finger tightened on the trigger. She could shoot. Papa had taught her young, and she'd been practicing for years. But Carver was right about one thing. She couldn't get all 3 before they rushed her. And if she missed, if she only wounded one, the standoff stretched, tension thick enough to choke on. Clara's arms were starting to shake from holding the heavy rifle steady. Then a voice cut through the darkness, calm as Sunday morning. "Miss Hayes asked you to leave." Ethan Cole stepped out of the shadows near the broken door, and Clara's heart lurched. How long had he been there? Where had he come from? Carver wheeled around. "This ain't your business, Cole." "Theft? Breaking and entering? Threatening a woman?" Ethan's voice never rose, but something in it made the temperature drop. "Pretty sure that's everyone's business, especially mine. There's 3 of us. I can count. We're armed. So am I." Ethan's hand rested casually near his hip, where Clara knew he carried a Colt that he could draw faster than most men could blink. "Question is whether you're stupid enough to find out who's faster." Carver's companions were already edging toward their horses. No one in Willow Ridge doubted Ethan Cole's reputation with a gun. Not hostile, not aggressive, but absolutely lethal when pushed. "This ain't over," Carver spat. "Sure it is." Ethan finally moved, positioning himself between the thieves and Clara. "You're leaving. You're not coming back. And if I hear about any trouble at this store, if even a single nail goes missing, I'll know where to look. We clear?" The 3 men retreated into the darkness, their cart abandoned, their bravado evaporated. Clara listened to hoofbeats fade before lowering the rifle, her arms suddenly weak as water. "You all right?" Ethan asked. "I had it under control." "I know you did." "Then why are you here?" She heard the shrill note in her own voice, hated it, couldn't stop it. "Why are you always here, Ethan? Do you just lurk around my store at night hoping for opportunities to play hero?" "Was checking my fence line. Saw lights where they shouldn't be. Came to investigate." He studied the broken lock with professional interest. "This is the 3rd break-in this month." "2nd. and I handled the first one just fine on my own. Uh-huh. That why you're shaking? Clara realized her hands were trembling, adrenaline crash hitting hard. She set the rifle down before she dropped it. I don't need your protection. Didn't say you did, but you've got it anyway. Ethan picked up the abandoned boxes, checking contents. Looks like they were going for fabric bolts. Smart. Easy to resell, hard to trace. They'll try again. Let them. I'll be ready. Clara. Something in the way he said her name made her look up. This isn't about you being capable. You're one of the most capable people I know, but capable doesn't mean invincible, and pride isn't armor. Is that what you think this is? Pride? What else would you call it? Survival? The word burst out of her, raw and honest. Every time I let someone help, every time I lean on someone, every time I trust that maybe I don't have to carry everything alone, they disappear. They die. They leave. They turn out to be just like Papa, taking and taking until there's nothing left. So yes, I'd rather do it alone. I'd rather struggle and fail on my own terms than succeed by making myself small enough to fit someone else's idea of who I should be. Ethan was quiet for so long, Clara thought he'd given up. Finally, he spoke. Your mama didn't get small because she loved your pa. She got small because he was a drunk who never deserved her. The bluntness of it shocked Clara into silence. Whole town knew it. Whole town watched Thomas Hayes piss away every good thing he ever had, including a wife who was worth 10 of him. But that's not love, Clara. That's addiction wearing love's face. And you're different? I'm sober. I'm steady. And I've never once asked you to be anything but exactly what you are. He moved toward the door, then paused. I'll fix this lock tonight. Got spare hardware in my barn. And before you argue, it's not for you. It's because I can't sleep knowing any fool with a crowbar can get at the best woman in this county. He was gone before Clara could formulate a response. She stood alone in her ransacked storage room, surrounded by scattered inventory and the lingering warmth of words she didn't know how to process. Best woman in the county. Not prettiest, not most eligible, not most desperate for a husband. Best. Like she was already enough. Like she didn't need fixing or saving or gentling into something more acceptable. Clara locked the front door. The back lock was beyond repair until Ethan returned, and climbed the stairs to check on her father. Thomas was awake, eyes bright with fever or emotion she couldn't tell which. Heard voices, he whispered. Trouble? Nothing I couldn't handle. Clara, her father's voice stopped her at the door. That man who just left, that was Ethan, wasn't it? She didn't answer. He loves you, really loves you, the kind that doesn't ask for anything back. Thomas's breathing grew labored. The kind your mama deserved and never got from me. The kind that makes you more yourself, not less. Papa, rest. Promise me something. His hand reached out, trembling. Promise me you won't let my mistakes cost you a chance at something real. Your mama's weakness wasn't loving too much. It was loving the wrong man. Don't make the opposite mistake and refuse to love at all. Clara fled to her own room before he could see the tears. Ethan Cole returned 2 hours later with a new lock, installation tools, and a quiet determination that made argument impossible. Clara watched from the stairs as he worked by lantern light, his movements efficient and sure. Didn't have to do this tonight, she said finally. Did actually, Carver's type. They test boundaries. Show them a weakness, they'll exploit it. He tested the new lock, nodded satisfaction. This'll hold better than the original. Reinforced strike plate, longer screws. Anyone wants in now, they'll have to make noise doing it. How much do I owe you? Ethan gathered his tools, not meeting her eyes. Nothing. Ethan, it's not a debt, Clara. It's what neighbors do. He moved toward the front door, then stopped. Can I ask you something? And will you give me an honest answer? She tensed. Depends on the question. What are you so afraid of? The question hit like a physical thing. Clara opened her mouth, closed it, tried again. I'm not... You are. I see it every time I walk through that door. Every time someone offers help. Every time the town gossips about you needing a husband. You're terrified. His voice was gentle, probing like a surgeon at a wound. Question is, terrified of what? Of me? Of marriage? Of repeating your mama's mistakes? All of it. The admission came out small. None of it. I don't know anymore. Fair enough. Ethan set down his toolbox, and for the first time in 3 years, he didn't leave right away. Instead, he settled onto the front step like he had all the time in the world. Want to know what I'm afraid of? Clara found herself sitting on the opposite end of the step, curiosity overcoming caution. What? Giving up on you. He said it simply, like discussing weather. I keep thinking next week, next month, next year. Eventually she'll see I'm not going anywhere. Eventually she'll trust that I mean what I say. But lately I've been wondering if I'm just being stubborn, if I'm holding on to something that was never meant to be mine. Something cold settled in Clara's stomach. So you're giving up? Didn't say that. Said I was afraid of it. He looked at her then, and in the lamplight his eyes were darker, older, tired in a way she'd never seen. 3 years, Clara. 3 years of showing up, helping out, proving I'm not your father, not some drunk who'll take until you're hollow. And you still look at me like I'm the enemy. I don't, you do. Every kindness I offer, you treat like a debt or a trap. Every time I fix something, you act like I'm taking away your independence instead of just helping, because that's what people who care about each other do. They help. Clara's throat felt tight. I can't afford to owe anyone. That's the problem right there. Ethan stood, dusting off his pants. You think everything's a transaction. Help equals debt equals control equals loss. But love doesn't work like that, Clara. Real love, the kind worth having, isn't about keeping score. Easy to say when you're not the one at risk. At risk? He actually laughed, bitter and sharp. You think I'm not at risk? I've spent 3 years caring about a woman who won't even admit we're friends. 3 years watching you struggle and hurt and nearly break, knowing I could make it easier, but you won't let me close enough to try. 3 years being the fool everyone talks about. Poor Ethan Cole, chasing after Thomas Hayes' stubborn daughter. Doesn't he know she'll never say yes? Then why keep doing it? Clara stood too, anger and something else churning in her chest. If I'm such a lost cause, why not find some nice, agreeable woman who'll appreciate your attention? Because I don't want some nice, agreeable woman. Ethan's voice rose for the first time since she'd known him, frustration finally breaking through that infuriating calm. I want the woman who stares down armed thieves with a rifle she's not sure she can fire. I want the woman who runs a failing business rather than admit defeat. I want the stubborn, proud, fierce, impossible woman who'd rather burn her life down than let anyone think she needed help. That's crazy. Maybe. He picked up his toolbox and his voice went quiet again. But it's the truth. Take it or leave it, Clara. That's all I've got. He left, and this time Clara didn't watch him go. She sat on the step until the cold drove her inside, Ethan's words circling her mind like vultures. I want the woman who'd rather burn her life down than let anyone think she needed help. Was that really who she was? So consumed by fear of weakness that she'd engineered her own isolation? Built walls so high not even genuine care could scale them. Upstairs, her father's labored breathing reminded her that time wasn't infinite. Decisions couldn't be postponed forever. The store was failing. Her savings were gone. Winter was coming with its brutal demands. And there was a man, a good man, a patient man, who'd been offering partnership for 3 years while she treated his every kindness like poison. Clara pulled out the store's ledger and stared at numbers that told the same story every night. She was losing. Slowly, inevitably, completely. Pride wasn't armor, but fear was a prison. And Clara Hayes was running out of time to decide which mattered more, protecting her heart or saving her life. The next morning brought Mrs. Henderson, the town's most reliable gossip, disguised as a customer needing thread. Clara, dear, I heard there was trouble here last night. She touched items without buying, eyes sharp. Someone said Ethan Cole was seen leaving quite late. People are talking. People always talk, Mrs. Henderson. Doesn't make it interesting. Well, I just think it's wonderful how he watches over you. Such a steadfast man. Any woman would be lucky to... Did you need the thread or not? Mrs. Henderson purchased her thread with wounded dignity and departed, no doubt to spread the news that Clara Hayes was as prickly as ever. Within hours, the whole town would know about the break-in, Ethan's rescue, and Clara's stubborn refusal to show proper gratitude. The morning crawled by with few customers. Clara was reorganizing stock, making full shelves look fuller through strategic arrangement, when young Billy Tucker burst through the door. Miss Clara! Miss Clara, come quick!" Her heart stopped. "Is it my father?" "No, ma'am. It's the Johnsons' place. Fire. Real bad. Mr. Cole's there trying to save the livestock, but the barn's about to go. And Mrs. Johnson thinks her boy's still inside." Clara grabbed her coat and ran. The Johnson farm lay 2 miles out, close enough that she could see the smoke column before she was halfway there. By the time she arrived, half the town had gathered, forming bucket brigades that seemed pathetically inadequate against the roaring flames. And there, emerging from the burning barn with a child in his arms and his shirt smoldering, was Ethan Cole. He passed the boy, coughing but alive, to his mother, and immediately turned back toward the inferno. "The horses!" John Johnson grabbed Ethan's arm. "There's still 3 horses." "I know." Ethan shook him off, soaked a cloth in the water trough, wrapped it around his face. "Ethan, no!" Clara heard her own voice, sharp with fear she didn't know she still felt. "The roof's going to collapse!" He looked at her then, and even through smoke and chaos, his eyes found hers with perfect clarity. "Can't let them burn." Then he was gone, back into the flames, and Clara understood with terrible certainty what loving someone actually meant. It meant watching them run into burning buildings and being powerless to stop them. It meant caring more about their survival than your own safety. It meant fear so intense it felt like dying. This is what Mama felt, Clara realized. This is what I've been running from. Not weakness, not loss of self, but the vulnerability of caring so much that someone else's pain becomes your own. The first horse burst from the barn, wild-eyed and terrified. Ethan right behind it. Then the second. The third was refusing to move, frozen in animal panic, and Ethan went back. The roof groaned. "It's coming down!" someone shouted. Clara ran forward, was held back by strong hands. She couldn't even tell whose. "Ethan! Ethan!" He appeared in the doorway, leading the final horse, and the barn roof chose that moment to surrender to gravity. Timber and flame crashed down with a sound like the world ending. Ethan dove clear, rolling in the dirt, the horse galloping past him to safety. He lay still for a moment that felt like forever, and Clara broke free of whoever held her, reaching him before conscious thought caught up. "Don't you dare!" she gasped, pulling at his shoulders, his face, checking for injuries with shaking hands. "Don't you dare do this to me, Ethan Cole. Don't you dare make me care." And then his eyes opened, smoke reddened but clear. "Hey, you idiot, you reckless, stupid, impossible." She couldn't finish, couldn't breathe, couldn't do anything but hold on to his singed shirt like it was the only solid thing in a world gone liquid. "They were just horses," someone murmured. "They were lives," Ethan rasped, coughing. "Worth saving." Like everything he did, every fence mended, every delivery saved, every crisis met with steady hands and that infuriating calm. Ethan Cole moved through the world looking for things worth saving and refusing to calculate the cost, including her, especially her. The realization hit Clara like a physical blow. She'd been so afraid of becoming her mother, small, diminished, lost in someone else's shadow, that she'd never considered an alternative. That maybe love didn't have to be about one person eclipsing another. Maybe it could be about 2 people becoming brighter together. The doctor checked Ethan over, pronounced him miraculously uninjured except for minor burns, and prescribed rest. Clara helped him to his feet, her arm around his waist, his weight leaning into her for the first time in 3 years. "Can you ride?" she asked. "Give me a minute." "No, you're coming to the store. I've got a room above the storage area, and you're going to rest there until you're not swaying like a drunk." Ethan looked at her, surprise finally breaking through his usual composure. "Clara, don't argue. You scared me half to death, and the least you can do is let me fuss over you for a few hours." She heard the tremor in her voice, didn't try to hide it. "Please." That single word, please, seemed to mean something to him. He nodded, let her help him onto his horse, and followed her back to town without protest. What? The room above the storage area was cramped but clean, used mostly for overflow inventory. Clara cleared space, brought water and clean cloths, helped Ethan remove his ruined shirt. His back was mapped with scars, some old, silvered with time, others newer. Working scars, the kind earned through labor and risk. Burns? She asked quietly, dabbing at a fresh mark on his shoulder. Some. Few from a broke-down fence years back. Most from just working cattle and horses. They're not gentle creatures when spooked. He hissed as the cloth found a tender spot. You don't have to do this. I know. You're being nice to me. It's unsettling. Despite everything, Clara almost smiled. Should I go back to being difficult? Wouldn't know how to handle you any other way. She finished cleaning the worst of the burns, applied salve with careful fingers. Ethan sat still under her ministrations, watching her face with an intensity that made her nervous. Why'd you come? He asked finally. To the fire? You don't even like the Johnsons much. Emily Johnson's been saying for years you're too proud for your own good. Billy said you were there, said it was bad. Clara focused on bandaging, not meeting his eyes. I needed to see. See what? That you were all right. The admission came out barely above a whisper. When that roof came down, I thought. Her hands stilled. I can't lose anyone else, Ethan. My mother, and soon my father, and I've built my whole life around not letting anyone else get close enough to become another loss. But then you went into that burning barn, and I realized it's too late. Too late for what? Too late to not care. She finally looked up, meeting those creekwater eyes. You've been wearing me down for 3 years, being patient and steady and showing up even when I'm hateful, proving you're not my father, not some man who'll take until I'm empty. And I've been so afraid of turning into my mother that I couldn't see what? That you're not asking me to disappear. You're asking me to be seen. Ethan's hand came up, gentle, cupping her face. Clara Hayes. Finally. Don't gloat. Wouldn't dream of it. But he was smiling, and it transformed his usually stern face into something young and hopeful. Though I reserve the right to feel relieved, 3 years is a long time to court a woman who acts like courting's a criminal offense. I never said you could court me. You never said I couldn't. That's not how consent works, Ethan. Probably not. His thumb traced her cheekbone, and Clara felt heat that had nothing to do with fire. And Clara, listen. But I figured waiting for an engraved invitation from you would take another decade, and I'm not getting any younger. Clara caught his wrist, held his hand against her face. I'm still scared. I know. I don't know how to do this, how to let someone in without losing myself in the process. Then we'll figure it out together. Ethan's voice was firm, certain. But Clara, I need you to understand something. I'm not your father. I don't want a shadow or a servant or some diminished version of you. I want the woman who stares down thieves and runs a business in impossible conditions and refuses to bend even when bending would be easier. What if I can't be that woman and also be with you? Then you pick being yourself, and I'll love you anyway. He said it simply, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. That's how this works. You stay you, I stay me. And we build something together that makes us both stronger. You make it sound simple. It's not. It's probably going to be difficult and frustrating and full of arguments because neither of us is particularly good at backing down. He pulled her closer, and Clara let herself be pulled. But I've never wanted simple. I've only wanted you. When he kissed her, it tasted like smoke and ash and new beginnings. Clara kissed him back, tentative at first, then with growing certainty. This was different from fear. This was choice. Active, deliberate, hers. A knock on the door broke them apart. Clara's father's voice drifted through. Clara, you up there? Mrs. Henderson said you dragged Ethan home like a sack of grain. Just wanted to make sure nobody died of propriety violation. Clara laughed, actually laughed, and opened the door. We're fine, Papa. Ethan got burned helping the Johnsons. I'm just bandaging him up. Thomas Hayes looked from his daughter's flushed face to Ethan's careful smile and nodded slowly. Uh-huh. That what they're calling it now? Bandaging? Papa! Just glad to see you finally come to your senses, girl. He turned to Ethan. You heard her. I'll haunt you from the grave. We clear? Crystal clear, sir. Good. Now, Clara, get down here and help me with inventory. We've got supplier payments coming due, and I need your head for numbers." He paused at the stairs. "After you finish bandaging, of course." After her father left, Ethan caught Clara's hand. "He approves." Shockingly, though he might change his mind when he realizes you've distracted his accountant. She squeezed his fingers. "I should go help him." "Clara," Ethan's grip tightened. "Before you go, we're clear on this, right? This isn't me rescuing you or saving you or any of that nonsense. This is partnership." "Partnership," she repeated, testing the word. It felt better than surrender, stronger than dependence. "I like that." "Good, because I'm going to need you to save me just as often as I save you. Fair's fair." "Deal." He pulled her in for one more kiss, this one slower, deeper, full of promise. When they finally broke apart, Clara felt different, lighter somehow, like she'd been carrying weight she hadn't realized was there. Maybe love didn't have to mean weakness. Maybe it could mean finding someone strong enough to match you. Maybe, just maybe, she'd been wrong about everything. The winter that followed came early and hard, like the land itself wanted to test Clara's newfound resolve. By mid-November, snow had already buried the rutted roads leading into Willow Ridge, and the wind howled through gaps in the trading post's walls with a persistence that matched Ethan's 3-year courtship. Clara stood at the window watching dawn break over a landscape transformed into white desolation, her breath fogging the glass. Behind her, the store felt cavernous and cold, despite the pot-belly stove burning in the corner. Inventory had dwindled to alarming levels. Shelves that should have groaned under winter supplies now showed more wood than goods. The bell chimed. She didn't need to turn around to know who it was. "Morning," Ethan said, stamping snow from his boots. "Brought something." Clara turned to find him holding a crate, his shoulders dusted white, face reddened from cold. "If that's charity, it's supplies, from Denver. Ordered them 3 weeks ago when I was up there selling cattle." He set the crate on the counter with a solid thunk. "Figured you could use quality goods at cost. No markup, no charity. Pure business." She approached warily, lifting the crate's lid to reveal fabric bolts, sewing supplies, lamp oil, medicines. All the things her suppliers had stopped extending credit for. "Ethan, this is smart business." His voice was firm. "I need a reliable place to buy supplies. You need inventory. We both win. Unless you'd rather I start shopping at Pritchard's?" It was a lifeline dressed as pragmatism, and they both knew it. Clara ran her fingers over the fabric, fighting the urge to check the prices against what she knew Denver wholesalers charged. If Ethan was selling at cost, he was losing money on transport alone. "I can't pay you today," she said quietly. "Didn't ask you to. We'll settle accounts at month's end like any supplier arrangement." He moved to the stove, warming his hands. "How's your father?" "Worse. The cold's hard on his lungs." Clara began unpacking the crate, needing something to do with her hands. "Doctor says it's just a matter of time now. Weeks, maybe days." Ethan was silent for a moment, and when he spoke, his voice carried the weight of someone who knew grief personally. "I'm sorry." "Don't be. He's lived longer than anyone expected." She folded fabric with mechanical precision. "I should be grateful." Gratitude and grief aren't mutually exclusive. "No." Clara's hands stilled. "No, they're not." They worked in companionable silence, Ethan helping her stock shelves despite her half-hearted protests. It was becoming their pattern, him showing up, her resisting on principle, both of them eventually settling into an easy rhythm that felt dangerously close to partnership. Mrs. Chen came in around mid-morning, the town's seamstress and one of Clara's few remaining regular customers. Her eyes lit up at the sight of new fabric. "Miss Clara, you got the calico in, and is that wool? Real wool, not that cheap blend Pritchard's been pushing?" "Just came in this morning." Clara pulled down bolts for inspection. $2 a yard for the wool, $1.20 for the calico. Mrs. Chen examined the goods with an expert's eye, nodding approval. "I'll take 4 yards of each. Got 3 wedding dresses to finish before Christmas, and the brides are getting particular." She glanced at Ethan, then back to Clara with barely concealed amusement. "Speaking of weddings, there's a betting pool at the saloon about when you two will finally—" "Mrs. Chen," Clara's voice could have frozen the remaining stock. "Your fabric comes to $14.40. The seamstress paid with a knowing smile and departed, leaving awkward silence in her wake. Betting pool? Ethan asked mildly. Town's bored. They need better entertainment. We could give them something to talk about. He said it casually, but Clara caught the undertone, a question disguised as a statement. Ethan, I'm not proposing. Not yet. He held up his hands. But Clara, we've been, whatever this is, for 2 months now. You let me court you sometimes. You let me help occasionally. But you still flinch every time I get too close. Still treat every gesture like it might be a trap. I'm trying. I know you are. But I need to understand, are you trying to trust me or trying to prepare for when I leave? The question cut deep because it was fair. Clara had been holding part of herself back, maintaining exit strategies, keeping emotional distance even as she let physical distance close. It was exhausting, this constant calibration of how much to give versus how much to protect. Both, she admitted. Everyone leaves eventually, Ethan. Death or disappointment or just life. My mother left. My father's leaving. Why would you be different? Because I choose to be. He crossed to her, his movements deliberate, giving her time to retreat if she wanted. She didn't. Every morning I wake up and choose you again. Every day you're difficult or stubborn or impossible. I choose you. Every time the town whispers that I'm a fool chasing a lost cause, I choose you. That's the difference. Choosing isn't the same as staying. No, but it's how staying starts. His hands found hers, calloused palms against calloused palms. I can't promise I won't die. Can't promise life won't throw hell at us. But I can promise that as long as I'm breathing, I'm here. With you. For you. Beside you. Clara wanted to believe him, wanted it so badly her chest ached with the wanting. But fear had been her companion longer than hope, and old habits died harder than old dreams. Ask me again, she whispered. When spring comes, when my father's after. Ask me then. Something flickered in Ethan's eyes. Disappointment, maybe, or understanding. All right, spring. The bell chimed again, and they stepped apart like guilty children as John Pritchard himself walked in, brushing snow from an expensive coat that probably cost more than Clara's entire winter inventory. Miss Hayes. Pritchard's smile was all teeth and no warmth. Mr. Cole. What a cozy scene. Mr. Pritchard. Clara's voice went carefully neutral. What brings you here? I thought you considered my establishment beneath your standards. Quite the contrary. I've come to make you an offer. He produced a leather portfolio, laying papers on the counter with theatrical flourish. I'm prepared to buy Hayes Trading Post, lock, stock, and real estate. Generous terms, enough to clear your debts, care for your father's medical needs, and leave you with a comfortable nest egg. Clara's heart seized. The store isn't for sale. Everything's for sale at the right price, Miss Hayes, and my price is more than fair. He gestured at the sparse shelves. Look around. You're failing. Winter's barely started and you're already running on fumes. By spring, you'll have nothing left to sell. Then I'll have nothing, but it'll still be mine. Pritchard's smile sharpened. Pride's expensive. Can you afford it? Can you afford to keep undercutting prices until you drive every competitor out of business? Ethan's voice was quiet, dangerous. Because that's what this is about, isn't it? Not helping Clara. Eliminating competition. This is a private conversation, Cole. The lady's not interested. That makes it over. Ethan moved closer to Clara, a united front. Time to leave. Miss Hayes can speak for herself. She did. You just didn't like her answer. Ethan's hand found the small of Clara's back, steadying. Now leave, before we start asking uncomfortable questions about where you got the money for that fancy new store. Funny timing, buying property right after the bank got robbed last year. Pritchard's face went red. You're implying... I'm not implying anything, just making an observation, which the sheriff might find interesting if we mentioned it. The threat hung in the air, ugly and effective. Pritchard gathered his papers with jerky movements. This isn't over, Miss Hayes. Reality doesn't care about your stubbornness. When you're ready to be sensible, my offer stands. After he left, Clara sagged against the counter. He's right, you know, about the store. We're dying slowly. Then we find a way to breathe life back in. With what? Hope and determination? Those don't pay suppliers. She gestured at the half-empty shelves. Even with your goods, we're barely treading water. One bad week and we're done. So we changed the game. Ethan leaned against the counter, thinking. What if we stopped competing on price and started competing on service? Pritchard's got volume, but he doesn't know his customers. You do. Every person in this county, what they need, when they need it. Knowing doesn't help if I can't afford to stock it. What if you didn't stock it? What if you special ordered? His voice gained momentum as the idea took shape. Customers tell you what they need, you order direct from Denver using my connections, they pay a deposit up front. No inventory risk, guaranteed sales, personalized service, Pritchard can't match. Clara's mind raced through the logistics. That could work for specialty items, but daily goods, staples, people need those immediately. So you keep minimal stock of essentials, focus resources there. Everything else, custom order. Make Hayes Trading Post the place that gets you exactly what you need, even if you have to wait a week. It was risky. It was different. It was possibly the only path forward that didn't end in Pritchard's victory or bankruptcy. We'd need capital to start, Clara said slowly. Money for samples, catalogs, initial orders. I've got savings. No. The refusal was automatic. I won't take your money, Ethan. That's exactly the kind of dependence I've been trying to avoid. It's not dependence, it's investment. I put in capital, you put in expertise and labor. We split profits, pure business partnership. And when we fail? If we fail together. But we won't. He pushed off the counter, energy radiating from him. Clara, you're the smartest merchant in this county. You've kept this place running on scraps and willpower for 6 months. Imagine what you could do with actual resources. She wanted to say yes, wanted to grab this lifeline with both hands, but accepting meant binding herself to Ethan not just romantically, but financially. Meant trusting him with her livelihood as well as her heart. Meant vulnerability multiplied. I need to think about it, she said finally. Fair enough. But Clara, think fast. Pritchard won't wait forever to squeeze you out. After Ethan left, Clara climbed the stairs to her father's room with a bowl of broth that would likely go uneaten. Thomas was awake, staring at the ceiling with the distant expression of someone measuring the space between moments. Heard Pritchard's voice, he rasped. That vulture still circling? Wants to buy the store. You tell him to go to hell? More or less. Clara helped her father sit up, adjusting pillows with practiced care. Ethan thinks we should change our business model. Special orders, personalized service. Smart man, that Ethan. Thomas accepted a spoonful of broth, grimacing at the taste. You thinking of taking his advice? He wants to invest his own money. Make it a partnership. And that scares you. It wasn't a question. Clara set down the bowl, sinking into the chair beside her father's bed. Everything about him scares me. The way he makes sense, the way he sees solutions where I see only problems, the way he's becoming essential. Love's supposed to feel essential, Clara, that's the point. But what happens when essential becomes irreplaceable? When I can't remember how to stand without him holding me up? She twisted her hands in her lap. You and Mama. I watched her disappear into you. Watched her forget she was a separate person with separate dreams. I can't do that. Thomas was quiet for a long moment, his breathing labored. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of deathbed honesty. Your mama didn't disappear into me. I erased her. The admission came out raw. Every time she wanted to paint, I needed her to cook. Every time she wanted to read, I needed her to work. Every time she tried to be more than my wife, I made her feel guilty for it. That wasn't love consuming her. That was me being selfish and calling it devotion. Papa, let me finish. Don't have much time left to make this right. He gripped her hand with surprising strength. Ethan's not me. I've watched him these past months, the way he looks at you. He doesn't want to own you or diminish you. He wants to stand beside you and see what you build together. That's different, Clara. That's real. How do I know for sure? You don't. That's what trust is, choosing to believe without proof. Thomas's eyes were bright with fever and urgency. But here's what I know. You've been alone your whole life, fighting every battle solo, refusing every offered hand. And it's made you strong, yes, but it's also made you lonely. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do isn't standing alone. Sometimes it's accepting that you don't have to. Clara felt tears burning behind her eyes. What if I accept and he changes? What if I let him in and he becomes like me? Thomas's laugh was bitter. Then you leave. You take what you've built and you walk away with your head high. But Clara, you can't live your whole life preparing for the worst. At some point, you've got to risk believing in the best. That night, long after her father had drifted into restless sleep, Clara sat with the store's ledgers and a list of possibilities. Ethan's plan could work. Would work, probably, if she had the courage to try. The question wasn't whether she trusted Ethan's business sense. The question was whether she trusted him with everything, her livelihood, her heart, her carefully constructed defenses against a world that took and gave back grief. Dawn was breaking when she made her decision. She found Ethan in his barn, mucking stalls with the methodical efficiency he brought to everything. He looked up when her shadow fell across the doorway, surprise and wariness mixing on his face. "Clara, something wrong?" "I want to accept your offer, the partnership." She stepped inside, breathing in the familiar scent of hay and horse and leather. "But I have conditions." "All right." He set aside his shovel, giving her his full attention. "I'm listening." "Equal partnership, 50-50 on decisions and profits. You don't get final say just because you're putting up capital." "Agreed." "I manage day-to-day operations. You handle supplier relationships and transport. We meet weekly to discuss strategy, but neither of us makes major decisions without the other's approval." "Makes sense." "And if this fails, if we lose everything, you don't get to play hero and try to save me. We fail together or succeed together. No rescue attempts." Ethan's mouth quirked. "You've given this a lot of thought." "I've given it everything I have." Clara moved closer, close enough to see the gold flecks in his creek water eyes. "This isn't just business for me, Ethan. This is my father's legacy, my family's history. If I'm trusting you with it, I need to know you understand what you're taking on. I understand you're entrusting me with the most important thing in your life." His hands came up, framing her face with a gentleness that made her throat tight. "And I'm promising to treat you, with the respect that deserves. Partners, Clara. In everything." "Partners," she echoed, and sealed it with a kiss that tasted like trust and terror in equal measure. They spent the next week transforming the trading post. Ethan brought catalogs from Denver suppliers, thick volumes showing everything from farming equipment to women's fashions. Clara organized them by category, creating a system where customers could browse options and place orders. They cleared out the slowest-moving inventory at cost, using the space to create a comfortable consultation area with chairs and good lighting. Mrs. Chen was their first official custom order customer, requesting specific silk for a wealthy client's wedding dress. Then John Morrison ordered specialized tools for his blacksmith shop. Then Sarah Brennan, remembering Ethan's observation about finishing nails, ordered a bulk supply at a price that undercut Pritchard's by incorporating Denver direct shipping. Word spread. Within 2 weeks, Hayes Trading Post had transformed from a dying general store into something new, a hybrid of traditional retail and specialized service that played to Clara's strengths and Ethan's connections. Pritchard noticed. "You're making enemies," Sheriff Wade Warner warned Clara one afternoon, his tone conversational but his eyes serious. "Pritchard's been asking questions about your supply lines, your financing. He doesn't like that you're cutting into his business." "Competition's legal, last I checked." "Legal, sure. But Pritchard's got friends, rich friends with long memories." Wade leaned against the counter, dropping his voice. "Watch yourself, Clara. Men like him don't take losing gracefully." The warning proved prescient 2 days later when the first shipment under their new system arrived, or rather, didn't arrive. The freight company sent a terse note: "Goods damaged in transit. Full loss. No compensation per standard terms." Clara stared at the notice, ice forming in her stomach. That shipment was $600. $600 of customer orders were now responsible for filling. Damaged how? Ethan examined the paperwork. "This company's reliable. I've used them for 5 years without incident. Maybe our luck ran out. Or maybe someone made sure it did." His jaw was tight. "Pritchard, you don't know that." I know timing. I know that freight doesn't just get damaged the first time we use a new system that threatens his business. Ethan stood abruptly. I'm going to Denver. Going to see what really happened to that shipment. Ethan, if it's already destroyed, then I need to know how and why, so we can prevent it next time. He pulled on his coat. Can you manage the store alone for a few days? Clara wanted to say no, wanted to protest the risk and the expense and the possibility of danger. But partnership meant trusting his judgment even when fear whispered objections. Be careful, she said instead. He kissed her forehead, quick and fierce. Always am. After he left, Clara faced the harder task of explaining to 6 customers that their orders were delayed. Mrs. Chen took it in stride. Sarah Brennan was understanding, but Tom Phillips, who'd ordered specialized farming equipment, was less forgiving. This is exactly why I usually deal with Pritchard, he growled. He might charge more, but at least he's reliable. We'll make this right, Clara promised. Full refund if you want it, or we'll reorder at our expense and rush delivery. I needed that equipment 2 weeks ago. By the time you reorder, planting season will be half over. Philip shook his head in disgust. Should have known better than to trust a failing business trying to reinvent itself. His words stung because they carried truth. One failure was all it took to destroy the fragile trust they'd been building. If customers lost faith now, the new model would collapse before it had a chance to prove itself. That night, lying awake listening to her father's labored breathing, Clara faced the possibility that she'd made a terrible mistake. Not in trusting Ethan, in believing that wanting something badly enough could make it work. Reality didn't care about determination or partnerships or love. Reality cared about results. And right now, they were failing. Ethan returned 3 days later, covered in road dust and radiating controlled fury. He found Clara closing up the store, her movements mechanical with exhaustion. It was sabotage, he said without preamble. The freight company's warehouse foreman admitted it after I leaned on him. Someone paid him $500 to accidentally damage our shipment. Pritchard. Can't prove it. The foreman won't testify, and the payment was cash with no trail. Ethan slammed his hand against the counter, frustration breaking through. But we both know who benefits. Knowing doesn't help if we can't prove it. Clara felt something inside her hardening, anger crystallizing into resolve. What we can do is not let it stop us. We reorder, we rush delivery, we eat the cost, and we keep going. Because that's what Pritchard doesn't understand about us. What's that? We're too stubborn to quit. The reorder arrived within a week, rushed at significant expense. Clara personally delivered each item with profuse apologies and a promise. This would never happen again. Most customers accepted. Tom Phillips didn't, taking his business back to Pritchard with a lecture about reliability versus ambition. It hurt. But it also clarified something for Clara. They couldn't compete with Pritchard on his terms. They had to make their own rules, create their own niche, build something so uniquely valuable that sabotage couldn't destroy it. We need to go further, she told Ethan that night, spreading new plans across the counter. Not just custom orders, personal service. I know every family in this county, their needs, their habits. What if we anticipated orders before customers even asked? What if we reached out, reminded them about seasonal needs, offered suggestions based on their specific situations? That's a lot of work. I don't mind work. I mind losing. Clara's eyes were bright with fierce determination. Pritchard thinks he can outlast us? Let him try. We'll work harder, smarter, more personally than his impersonal operation ever could. Ethan studied her face, the sharp angles carved by stress and stubbornness, the green eyes burning with defiance, and something in his expression shifted. You're magnificent when you're angry. I'm magnificent all the time. You're just now noticing? No, I've been noticing for 3 years. Just took you this long to let me say it out loud. He pulled her close, and Clara let herself lean into his strength. We're going to win, Clara. Not because we're lucky or privileged or protected, because we're us, and that's enough. She wanted to believe him. Some days she did. December deepened its grip on Willow Ridge. Snow piled high enough to block roads, cold bit through every wall, and Thomas Hayes began the slow process of saying goodbye. He'd linger in the store on good days, wrapped in blankets, offering advice that Clara pretended to need. On bad days, he stayed in bed, his breathing increasingly labored, his moments of clarity growing fewer. "He's not going to see spring," Dr. Morrison told Clara quietly one evening. "Another few weeks at most, I'm sorry." Clara nodded, unable to speak around the grief lodging in her throat. She'd known this was coming for months, but knowing didn't make it easier. Nothing made it easier. Ethan found her that night, sitting alone in the dark store, crying for the first time since her mother's death. He didn't say anything, just sat beside her and held her while she shattered. "I can't do this," she gasped between sobs. "Can't watch him die, can't run this business, can't be strong enough for everything that needs me to be strong." "Then don't be strong. Not tonight." Ethan's voice was steady in the darkness. "Tonight, just be human, just be Clara. Let me carry the weight for a few hours." "That's not partnership, that's dependency." "No, that's love. Real love. The kind where you take turns being strong because nobody can carry everything all the time." "Pussy." He brushed tears from her face with calloused thumbs. "You've been holding this town, this business, your father, everything together through sheer force of will, but Clara, you're allowed to break sometimes. I'll hold the pieces until you're ready to put yourself back together." So she broke. Let herself be vulnerable and weak and terrified in Ethan's arms, trusting that he wouldn't use her tears as leverage, wouldn't see her humanity as invitation to take control. When she finally cried herself empty, Ethan was still there, still holding her, still steady. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "For proving me wrong about everything." Thomas Hayes died 2 weeks before Christmas, quietly in his sleep with Clara holding his hand. The town turned out for his funeral, not because he'd been particularly beloved, but because everyone understood what Clara was losing. Parents, legacy, the last tie to her childhood. Ethan stood beside her at the graveside, solid and silent. He didn't try to comfort her with empty platitudes or religious certainties. He just stayed, his presence saying what words couldn't. "You're not alone." After the service, standing in the empty store that now belonged entirely to her, Clara felt the weight of inheritance settle onto her shoulders. This building, this business, this life, all hers now. No safety net, no fallback, no one to blame if she failed. "What are you thinking?" Ethan asked quietly. "That I'm terrified." Clara touched the old oak counter, feeling decades of use worn smooth under her palm, and that I can't wait to prove to everyone, especially myself, what this place can become. "That's my girl." "Your partner," she corrected. "That too." He smiled, sad and proud at once. "Your father would be proud of you, Clara, of who you've become." "He was proud of you too, told me so near the end. Said he was glad I'd finally stopped being stupid about letting you in." She managed a watery smile. "His words, not mine?" "Sounds like him." Ethan pulled her close, and Clara let herself rest against his chest, hearing his heartbeat steady beneath her ear. "What happens now?" "Now?" Clara looked around the store, their store really, though the papers still only bore her name. "Now we build something worth remembering, something that makes all this struggle mean something. Together?" "Together," she agreed, and felt the words settle into truth. The winter that had taken Thomas Hayes showed no signs of loosening its grip on Willow Ridge. January arrived with blizzards that buried the town in white silence, and February followed with temperatures cold enough to freeze whiskey in the glass. Clara threw herself into work with the fervor of someone outrunning grief, rising before dawn and collapsing long after midnight, transforming the trading post into something her father would never recognize. The custom order system was thriving despite Pritchard's best efforts at sabotage. Clara had memorized every family's needs, anticipated orders before customers thought to ask, and built relationships that couldn't be undercut by lower prices. When Sarah Brennan's youngest caught fever, Clara had medicine ready before Sarah made it to the store. When the Morrison family welcomed their fourth child, Clara sent congratulations with a basket of practical baby supplies at cost. When old Marcus Webb broke his plow in frozen ground, Clara expedited replacement parts from Denver and had Ethan deliver them personally. It was working. Slowly, painfully, expensively, but working. The ledgers were beginning to show black instead of red, and customers who'd defected to Pritchard's were quietly returning, drawn by service that felt personal rather than transactional. But success came with a price Clara hadn't anticipated. She was exhausted in ways sleep couldn't fix, running on determination and coffee, barely eating, hardly pausing. The store consumed her completely, leaving nothing for herself or anyone else, including Ethan. He still came by daily, still helped with heavy lifting and inventory and difficult customers, but there was a distance growing between them that neither acknowledged, a space carved by Clara's single-minded focus on proving she could survive alone even while accepting his partnership. It came to a head on a bitter February evening when Ethan found Clara asleep at the counter, her face pillowed on account books, dark circles carved beneath her eyes like bruises. "Clara." He shook her shoulder gently. "It's past midnight. You need to go to bed." She jerked awake, disoriented. "What?" "No, I'm not done. Need to finish tallying the inventory before the Denver order goes out. The order doesn't leave until Friday. It's Tuesday. You've got time. But if I do it now, I can use Wednesday for customer consultations. Thursday for—" "Clara, stop." Ethan's voice was sharper than she'd ever heard it. "Look at yourself. You're running yourself into the ground." "I'm fine." "You're not fine. You're barely standing. When's the last time you ate a real meal? Slept more than 4 hours? Did anything that wasn't work?" He gestured at the cluttered store, the endless lists and ledgers. "This place is thriving. You're withering." Clara stood abruptly, anger flashing. "What do you want from me, Ethan? You want success or you want me to slow down? Because I can't give you both. This business doesn't run on wishes and good intentions. It runs on work. Constant, grinding, never enough work. I want you to remember you're human. That success doesn't matter if you kill yourself achieving it." "Easy for you to say. You've got a ranch that practically runs itself, savings to fall back on, a name that means something in this county. I've got a store that was failing 6 months ago and a dead father's expectations to live up to." "Your father never expected you to work yourself to death." "No, he just expected me to survive, to keep his legacy alive, to prove that a woman alone can run a business without needing some man to—" She stopped, hearing her own words, seeing Ethan's face close down. "Is that what you think?" His voice went quiet, dangerous. "That I'm some man trying to control you? After everything we've been through, everything I've done to prove I'm different, you still see me as the enemy?" "I don't—" "You do. Every time you work yourself sick refusing to ask for help. Every time you treat my concern like criticism. Every time you push yourself harder just to prove you don't need anyone." Ethan ran a hand through his hair, frustration and hurt warring across his face. "I'm not your father, Clara. I'm not trying to diminish you or control you or make you dependent, but I'm also not going to watch you destroy yourself and call it independence." "Then don't watch. Nobody asked you to stay." The words hung between them, cruel and deliberate. Clara saw them land, saw Ethan flinch like she'd struck him. "Fine." He picked up his coat with careful, controlled movements. "You want to do this alone? You've got it. I'm done fighting to be let into your life when you keep treating partnership like prison." "Ethan, wait." But he was already gone, the bell's chime echoing in the sudden silence. Clara stood alone in her store, surrounded by the evidence of their shared success, and felt the hollow victory of getting exactly what she'd claimed to want: independence, solitude, no one to disappoint or be disappointed by. It felt like losing. She made it through Wednesday on momentum and pride. Thursday brought the first cracks in her armor when she had to haul a 50-pound flour sack alone and nearly threw her back out. Friday morning, she woke to find the store's front window shattered, rocks scattered across the floor with a note attached to the largest. "You're next." Clara swept the glass with shaking hands, trying not to think about how Ethan would have already been there, would have known what to do, would have made her feel safe instead of exposed and vulnerable. Sheriff Warner came to investigate, his expression grim. "This is escalating. First the sabotage shipment, now vandalism. Whoever's behind this wants you scared." "Well, they're succeeding." Clara couldn't keep the tremor from her voice. "Any idea who?" "Ideas, no proof. Pritchard's too smart to leave evidence." Wade examined the note, his jaw tight. "You should consider closing up for a while. Let things cool down." "That's exactly what they want." "I close. Customers get nervous. Business dies." "No." Clara forced steel into her spine. "I'm not running." Stubborn Hayes pride. "Your father had it too." Wade handed back the note. "At least tell me you've got someone watching your back. Ethan Cole, maybe?" The name was a knife between her ribs. "Ethan and I aren't. We had a disagreement." "Clara, this is serious." Whoever threw those rocks might come back with something worse. I can take care of myself. Wade sighed the sigh of a man who'd had this argument before and knew he'd lose again. Get that window boarded up before tonight. And Clara, maybe it's time to stop proving you can do everything alone and start accepting that you don't have to. After he left, Clara stood staring at the shattered window, Wade's words circling her mind. How many people were going to tell her the same thing before she listened? How much did she have to lose before pride stopped feeling like protection and started feeling like poison? She was still standing there when Mrs. Chen arrived, took one look at the damage, and marched Clara to the back room. Sit. The seamstress's tone brooked no argument. I'm making tea, and you're going to drink it while I tell you something you desperately need to hear. Mrs. Chen, I don't have time. Make time. Your health and safety are more important than inventory. She busied herself with the kettle, moving through Clara's space with the confidence of someone who'd decided intervention was necessary. I've known you since you were a stubborn child, Clara Hayes. Watched you grow up fighting every battle alone, refusing every helping hand. And I stayed quiet because I figured you needed to find your own way. But this? She gestured at the shattered window. This is what happens when stubbornness becomes stupidity. I'm handling it. You're barely surviving it. Mrs. Chen set down 2 cups, her lined face stern. Ethan Cole hasn't been around in 3 days. The whole town's noticed. What happened? We had a disagreement about boundaries. About you working yourself to death, you mean? Mrs. Chen fixed her with a knowing look. That man's been patient with you for 3 years, proven himself 100 different ways, and you drove him off because he dared suggest you take care of yourself? It's more complicated than it's not complicated at all. You're terrified of needing anyone, so you push away the one person who's proven he won't hurt you. The seamstress softened slightly. Clara, I knew your mother, beautiful woman, talented, full of fire before your father snuffed it out. And I understand why watching that would make you gun-shy about love. But punishing Ethan for Thomas's sins is unfair to both of you. Clara stared into her tea, seeing truth reflected in its dark surface. What if I let him in completely and he changes? What if I give him everything and he becomes like your father? Then you leave. But Clara, Ethan's had opportunities to control you, to take over, to make decisions without you. He hasn't, not once in all these months of partnership. That should tell you something. It tells me he's patient. Doesn't mean he won't eventually what? Love you? Support you? Be a genuine partner instead of a tyrant? Mrs. Chen set down her cup with a sharp click. You're so busy preparing for the worst that you can't see the good that's right in front of you. And meanwhile, you're destroying yourself trying to prove something that doesn't need proving. I just wanted to show everyone I could survive alone. Why? Who are you trying to convince, the town or yourself? The question landed like a blow. Because I'll tell you something, girl. Everyone in Willow Ridge already knows you're capable. You've proven it 1,000 times over. The only person still doubting you is you. After Mrs. Chen left, Clara sat in the silence of her store, surrounded by evidence of success that felt hollow without someone to share it with. She'd built exactly what she wanted, a thriving business, financial independence, proof that a woman alone could survive and even prosper in a world designed to make her fail. But surviving wasn't the same as living, and independence wasn't the same as freedom. She was still sitting there when the afternoon stagecoach brought news that exploded through Willow Ridge like dynamite. Pritchard's store had been robbed in the night, $15,000 in cash and goods, the safe cracked clean open, no witnesses, no leads. Sheriff Warner showed up at Clara's store within the hour, his face troubled. Need to ask you some questions. Clara's stomach dropped. You can't think I had anything to do with... No, but Pritchard's claiming you did. Says you've been desperate for cash, struggling to keep up with his competition. Says the timing's convenient. His store gets hit right after yours gets vandalized. That's insane. I was here all night, alone. Wade winced. That's the problem. No alibi. And Pritchard's got friends who are willing to believe his version, that you hired someone to hit him, maybe as revenge for the sabotaged shipment. I would never... I know that. But what I know and what I can prove are 2 different things. Pritchard's pushing hard for an investigation and I can't just ignore him. Wade shifted uncomfortably. Clara, I need to search your store and your living quarters. If there's nothing to find, that'll help clear you. The search turned up nothing because there was nothing to find, but the damage was done. By evening, the whole town was buzzing with speculation. Some defended Clara, but others, especially those who'd lost money betting on her failure, were happy to believe the worst. Business the next day dropped to nothing. Customers who would have normally stopped by crossed the street instead, avoiding eye contact. Even Mrs. Chen, who clearly believed in Clara's innocence, didn't come in, probably afraid of being associated with someone under suspicion. Clara stood behind her counter, watching her carefully built reputation crumble, and felt something inside her finally break. Not her determination or her pride or her fierce independence, something deeper, the belief that she could handle everything alone. She needed help, real help. The kind that required swallowing pride and admitting vulnerability and trusting someone else to catch her when she fell. She needed Ethan. The ride to his ranch took 30 minutes through snow and failing light. Clara's hands were numb on the reins by the time she reached his property, her nerve failing with each step closer to having to apologize and beg and admit she'd been wrong about everything. Ethan was in the barn, tending his horses with the same methodical care he brought to everything. He looked up when Clara entered, surprise and wariness crossing his face. "Clara, something wrong?" "Everything's wrong." She dismounted on shaking legs. "Pritchard's store was robbed. He's claiming I'm behind it. Sheriff searched my place, found nothing, but the whole town thinks I'm either guilty or desperate enough to have done it. I haven't had a customer in 2 days. My reputation's destroyed, my business is dying, and I—" Her voice cracked. "I need your help. I'm sorry for what I said. You were right about everything. I've been so scared of needing anyone that I pushed away the one person who's only ever tried to support me, and now I'm losing everything anyway, and I don't know what to do." The words tumbled out in a rush. 3 days of fear and exhaustion and pride-swallowing humility condensed into a single desperate confession. Clara stood there shaking, waiting for Ethan to tell her she'd burned her bridges, that she'd pushed too hard and too far, that he was done being patient with her self-destructive stubbornness. Instead, he set down his brush and closed the distance between them. Okay, we'll figure it out." He pulled her into his arms, and Clara felt the last of her defenses crumble. That's what partners do, Clara. They figure things out together, even when one partner is an idiot who drives the other away. Especially then. She felt him smile against her hair. "Though for the record, you're not an idiot, just scared. There's a difference." Clara pressed her face into his chest, breathing in the familiar scent of him, leather and hay and safety. "I'm sorry for what I said, for pushing you away, for being too proud to ask for help until everything fell apart. I know, and I'm sorry too, for pushing when you weren't ready, for not understanding how deep the fear went." Ethan pulled back enough to meet her eyes. "But Clara, we can't keep doing this. Can't keep building something together while you're constantly preparing for me to leave or change or betray you. At some point, you've got to choose to trust me. Really trust me." "I know." She touched his face, tracing the worried lines around his eyes. "I want to, I'm just terrified, I know. But here's the thing about fear. It only wins if you let it make your decisions." His hands framed her face, steady and sure. "So decide now. Are you choosing fear or are you choosing me?" It should have been an impossible question. 3 months ago, even 3 days ago, Clara would have balked at the ultimatum, seen it as pressure or control or someone trying to force her hand. But standing in Ethan's barn with her world crumbling and her pride in ruins, Clara finally understood what her father and Mrs. Chen and everyone else had been trying to tell her. Choosing someone else didn't mean losing yourself. It meant finding the courage to build something bigger than what one person could create alone. "I choose you," she said. "I choose us. I choose trusting that you're not going to become my father or disappear or make me regret letting you in. And if I backslide, if the fear comes back and I start pushing you away again, don't let me. Fight for us even when I'm fighting against us." "Deal." Ethan kissed her then, and it felt like sealing a covenant more binding than any legal partnership. "Now let's figure out who's really behind this robbery and clear your name." They worked through the night, spreading out everything Clara knew about Pritchard's operation, the timing of the sabotage, the vandalism, the robbery. Ethan added his own observations from years of dealing with Willow Ridge's business community, and slowly a picture emerged. It doesn't make sense, Clara said around 2 in the morning, her third cup of coffee going cold. If Pritchard wanted to frame me, why rob himself? Why not just make it look like I robbed him without actually losing anything? Unless he didn't lose anything. Ethan was staring at his notes, something clicking into place. Clara, what if the robbery was staged? What if Pritchard stole from himself, claimed a huge loss, and used it to both collect insurance and frame you? That's insane. Why would he? Because he's losing. Despite the sabotage, despite the lower prices, despite everything, you're winning. Customers are choosing quality service over convenience. And a man like Pritchard would rather burn everything down than admit defeat. Ethan's voice gained momentum. Think about it. He's been trying to buy you out, drive you out, scare you out. Nothing's worked. So he escalates. Makes himself a victim, makes you a villain, destroys your reputation while collecting enough insurance money to rebuild bigger than before. Clara's mind raced through the logic. If you're right, we need proof. Something connecting him to the robbery, showing it was staged. The safe. Ethan stood abruptly. Professional thieves would have blown the safe or left marks from cracking it. But if Pritchard opened it himself with his own combination, there'd be no damage. Wade said the safe was cracked clean open. That only happens when someone knows the combination. Or gets really lucky. Luck doesn't clean out every dollar while leaving the expensive lock undamaged. Ethan grabbed his coat. I'm going to talk to Wade, see if I can examine the safe. You stay here, get some rest. Ethan. Clara caught his arm. Thank you. For believing me. For helping even after I... Partners, Clara. You don't have to thank me for being what I signed up to be. He kissed her forehead. Get some sleep. Tomorrow we prove your innocence and take Pritchard down. But sleep was impossible. Clara paced Ethan's barn, her mind spinning through possibilities and fears. What if they were wrong? What if Pritchard had covered his tracks too well? What if Clara's reputation was permanently destroyed regardless of innocence? She was still pacing when Ethan returned at dawn, his face grim. Well? Clara demanded. You were right to be worried. Wade examined the safe. No damage, no marks, combination lock still intact and functional. Whoever opened it knew the combination. Ethan's jaw was tight. But Pritchard's claiming that proves nothing. Says the thieves could have tortured it out of him, forced him to open it at gunpoint. Convenient that there's no witnesses to support that. Very convenient. Wade's skeptical, but can't prove anything without more evidence. Ethan poured himself coffee, exhaustion carved into his face. We're missing something, some connection that ties it all together. Clara thought back through every interaction with Pritchard, every confrontation, every suspicious event. The warehouse foreman in Denver, the one who admitted someone paid him to damage our shipment, did he describe the person who paid him? Said it was a rough-looking man with a gap-toothed smile. Clara's blood went cold. Carver. The same man who tried to rob my store, the same man you scared off. Ethan, what if he's Pritchard's hired muscle? What if Pritchard's been using him for all the dirty work? If we could prove that connection, we could prove Pritchard's behind everything. Clara grabbed her coat. Where would Carver be hiding? Probably one of the boarding houses on the edge of town, somewhere cheap and anonymous. Ethan caught her arm. Clara, this could be dangerous. Let me handle it. Not a chance. This is my reputation, my business. We do this together or not at all. They found Carver at the third boarding house they tried, drunk and bragging to anyone who'd listen about his recent windfall. The story spilled out with the whiskey, how Pritchard had hired him to sabotage Clara's shipment, vandalize her store, and finally rob Pritchard's own business to frame her. $15,000 in stolen goods hidden in a warehouse outside town, waiting for Pritchard to quietly reclaim and resell while collecting insurance money. Sheriff Warner arrested Carver within the hour, and the drunk fool sang like a canary rather than face charges alone. By noon, Wade was knocking on Pritchard's door with a warrant. By evening, Pritchard was in jail and Clara's name was cleared. The town's apology came in the form of a flood of customers the next day, everyone suddenly remembering they needed supplies and wanted to support local business, and hadn't really believed those nasty rumors anyway. Clara accepted their return with professional grace and private cynicism. She knew how quickly public opinion could turn, how fragile reputation really was. But with Ethan beside her, helping with the rush, she also understood something new. She didn't have to carry the weight of public opinion alone. Didn't have to prove herself constantly or maintain perfect independence. She had a partner who'd fought beside her, believed in her even when the town didn't, and never once tried to take control or diminish her role in her own rescue. That evening, after the last customer left and they'd closed up together, Ethan pulled a small box from his pocket. "Before you panic," he said quickly, "I'm not proposing, not yet, but I want you to have this." Inside was a simple gold ring, worn smooth with age. Clara recognized it immediately. Ethan's mother's wedding band, the only thing he had left from parents who died when he was young. "Ethan, I can't." "You can, because it's not an engagement ring, it's a promise." He took the ring from the box, holding it up to the lamplight. "My mother wore this for 30 years while building a ranch with my father. Equal partners in everything, business, life, love. She was the strongest woman I ever knew until I met you. And I think she'd want you to have it." "As a promise of what?" "That I see you, really see you. Not some idealized version or diminished shadow, but you. Clara Hayes, stubborn and fierce and brilliant and terrified and brave enough to choose trust anyway." He slipped the ring onto her right hand, not her left. "When you're ready to move it to the other hand, you tell me. Could be next week, could be next year. I'll wait as long as it takes, but I wanted you to know I'm already all in. Have been since the day you stared me down with that rifle and told me to get off your property." Clara looked at the ring, warm and solid on her finger, and felt something settle into place. Not fear, not resistance, not the constant bracing for betrayal. Peace. "Ask me again in spring," she said softly, "when everything's green and alive and new. Ask me then, and I promise you'll get the answer you've been waiting for." Ethan's smile was slow and certain. "Spring it is." They stood together in the quiet store, two people who'd fought their way through sabotage and suspicion and self-doubt to build something worth protecting. Clara leaned into Ethan's warmth and looked around at shelves filled with promise rather than desperation, at a future that suddenly felt possible instead of terrifying. She'd spent so long equating independence with isolation, strength with solitude, survival with refusing all help. But maybe the bravest thing she could do wasn't standing alone. Maybe it was choosing to stand beside someone and trust they wouldn't use that closeness as a weapon. Maybe love wasn't about one person disappearing into another. Maybe it was about two people becoming more themselves together than they ever could apart. Clara touched the ring on her finger, already imagining the day she'd move it to her left hand, already seeing the future they'd build together. Not as rescuer and rescued, not as strong and weak, but as equals who'd chosen each other despite fear and because of hope. Spring was coming, and with it, a new beginning that Clara Hayes was finally ready to embrace. Spring arrived in fits and starts, the land too stubborn to surrender fully to warmth, but no longer willing to endure winter's harshness. Ice retreated from the roads, leaving mud deep enough to swallow wagon wheels. The air carried hints of green beneath lingering cold, and Clara found herself watching the calendar with a mixture of anticipation and terror that had nothing to do with business. Ethan had promised to ask again in spring. Spring was here. The ring on her right hand had become familiar weight, something she touched absently during quiet moments, a reminder of promises made and choices still pending. She'd grown comfortable with its presence, with what it represented, not ownership or obligation, but partnership freely chosen. But moving it to her left hand meant something irrevocable, meant standing before the town and declaring herself half of a union when she'd spent her entire adult life proving she needed no one, meant trusting that Ethan's patient devotion wouldn't curdle into the possessive control she'd watched destroy her mother, meant taking the final leap from independence into interdependence. The store was thriving in ways Clara had never imagined possible. With Pritchard in prison awaiting trial and his business seized for insurance fraud, Hayes Trading Post had become the primary supplier for Willow Ridge and the surrounding county. The custom order system had evolved into something more sophisticated, with Clara maintaining detailed records of every family's preferences, needs, and buying patterns. She could predict when the Johnsons would need new farming equipment, when Mrs. Chen would require specialty fabrics, when the mining families up in the hills would come down for bulk supplies. It was the kind of intimate business knowledge that couldn't be replicated by larger operations, the competitive advantage of someone who knew her community not as customers, but as neighbors. And it was working beautifully. Ethan had expanded his role beyond supplier and partner, becoming the public face of their freight operations. He'd negotiated better rates with Denver wholesalers, established reliable transport schedules, and built relationships with suppliers who trusted him enough to extend credit based solely on his word. His reputation bolstered hers, and hers added depth to his, creating something stronger than either could have achieved alone. They were succeeding, undeniably, measurably succeeding, which somehow made the prospect of marriage more terrifying rather than less. Clara had built her identity on self-sufficiency and survival. Who would she become as someone's wife? What parts of herself would she have to surrender to make room for someone else's needs and expectations? The questions circled her mind like vultures as March gave way to April and the first green shoots appeared in once frozen ground. Ethan hadn't pushed, hadn't mentioned the ring or spring or promises. He simply continued showing up every day, steady as sunrise, proving through action what words couldn't capture. It was Mrs. Chen who finally forced the issue, arriving at the store one morning with the determined expression of someone who'd decided intervention was necessary. "I need you to come with me," the seamstress announced without preamble. Clara looked up from inventory lists. "Mrs. Chen, I'm in the middle of—" "I don't care if you're in the middle of negotiating with the president himself. This is important." She grabbed Clara's coat from the hook. "We're going for a walk." There was no arguing with Mrs. Chen in this mood. Clara allowed herself to be herded outside into spring sunshine that felt almost warm, following the older woman toward the edge of town where the cemetery overlooked rolling prairie. They stopped at a familiar grave marker, simple stone carved with her mother's name and dates. Clara hadn't visited since her father's funeral, too consumed by work and worry to spend time communing with the dead. "Your mother and I were friends," Mrs. Chen said quietly, "before your father's drinking got bad, before she disappeared into trying to fix him. We used to sit and talk for hours, about art, about dreams, about the lives we wanted to build." Claire remained silent, unsure where this was leading. "She was brilliant, your mother. Had a mind for business that would have put most men to shame. Used to help your grandfather run this very store, knew every trick for maximizing profit while keeping customers loyal." Mrs. Chen touched the headstone gently. That's what made watching her fade so painful. Knowing what she could have been if she hadn't married the wrong man. "I know this story, Mrs. Chen. I lived it. No, you know part of it. The end. But you don't know the middle, the years before Thomas's weakness consumed them both." The seamstress turned to face Clara directly. "Your mother didn't start out diminished. She started out strong, independent, full of fire. Sound familiar?" Clara felt something cold settle in her stomach. "She fell in love with your father because he made her laugh, because he was charming and handsome and promised her adventures. And for a while it was good. They were partners, running the store together, building something real. Your mother didn't lose herself immediately. It happened slowly, over years, as Thomas's drinking progressed and his priorities shifted, and she kept compensating for his failures. So I'm right to be afraid. You're proving my point. No, I'm proving that the wrong partner can destroy you, but the right one can make you stronger." Mrs. Chen's voice was firm. "Your mother's mistake wasn't loving too much. It was choosing the wrong person to love and then refusing to leave when that person proved unworthy. She stayed because she thought love meant enduring anything, sacrificing everything, making herself smaller to avoid conflict. And you think Ethan's different. I know he is. Because I've watched him for 3 years, Clara. Watched him support your ambitions instead of competing with them. Watched him step back when you needed space and step up when you needed help. Watched him treat you as an equal instead of a possession." Mrs. Chen's lined face softened. "Your mother would have given anything to have what you're throwing away out of fear." Clara's throat felt tight. "What if I can't do it? What if I try to be someone's wife and lose the parts of myself that make me capable?" "Then you married the wrong man. But Ethan Cole isn't asking you to stop being Clara Hayes. He's asking permission to stand beside Clara Hayes for the rest of his life." The seamstress squeezed her shoulder. "Your mother's tragedy was loving someone who took. Your tragedy would be refusing someone who only wants to give. Don't let your father's sins cost you the future your mother would have wanted for you." After Mrs. Chen left, Clara sat alone beside her mother's grave, talking to stone and memory. She told her mother about the store's success, about Ethan's patience, about the ring on her right hand and the fear keeping it there. She talked until the words ran dry and the sun began its descent. And when she finally stood to leave, something had shifted inside her. Not resolution exactly, but clarity. She found Ethan at his ranch, working in the corral with a young mare that was learning to accept a saddle. He worked with the kind of infinite patience that characterized everything he did, never forcing, never rushing, just waiting for trust to develop naturally.
"She's beautiful," Clara said, leaning against the fence. Ethan glanced over, surprise and pleasure mixing on his face. "She will be. Still skittish, but coming around." He stroked the mare's neck, speaking softly. "Just needs time to learn that the saddle won't hurt her." "How long does that usually take?" "Depends on the horse. Some learn trust quickly. Others carry fear from past hurts and need more convincing."
He led the mare to the fence, close enough that Clara could reach out and touch her velvet nose. "But they all get there eventually, if you're patient enough." Clara met his eyes, understanding the metaphor. "What if this particular horse is taking too long? What if your patience runs out?" "Then I guess I'd keep being patient anyway, because some things are worth waiting for." He said it simply, without accusation or pressure. "Spring's here, Clara. Noticed you haven't said anything about that." "I know." She touched the ring on her right hand. "I've been thinking about it, about us, about what I'm ready for, and what still terrifies me. And I'm still scared. Probably always will be, on some level." Clara took a breath. "But I'm more scared of losing you because I was too afraid to take a risk. Of looking back in 20 years and realizing I threw away something real because I was preparing for something that never happened." Ethan's hand stilled on the mare's halter. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying ask me, right now. Don't wait for some perfect moment or symbolic gesture. Just ask." "Clara Hayes." He turned to face her fully, and his voice was steady despite the emotion in his eyes. "Will you marry me? Will you let me stand beside you while you build an empire, raise children if we're blessed with them, and probably argue with me daily because neither of us knows how to back down? Will you trust me enough to move that ring to your left hand and take a chance on building something neither of us can create alone?" She wanted to say yes immediately, wanted to leap the fence and kiss him, and let relief wash away months of anxiety. But honesty mattered more than romance. "I need you to know what you're getting," she said. "I'm going to backslide sometimes, going to push you away when fear gets loud, going to test whether you really mean it when you say you'll stay. I'm going to be difficult and stubborn and probably drive you crazy. I know. And I need promises from you, real ones." Clara's voice steadied with determination. "Promise you won't try to control the store or make business decisions without me. Promise you won't expect me to stop being who I am just because I'm someone's wife. Promise that if I start disappearing like my mother did, you'll tell me instead of letting it happen. I promise all of that. But I need a promise from you too." Ethan's voice was serious. "Promise that when you're scared or hurting or struggling, you'll tell me instead of shutting me out. Promise you'll let me help without treating it like weakness. Promise you'll fight for us even when fighting feels easier. I promise." Clara slipped the ring off her right hand, holding it up between them. "Now stop making me propose to myself and put this where it belongs." Ethan laughed, actually laughed, bright and relieved and joyful, and closed the distance between them. He took the ring, and Clara felt his hands trembling slightly as he slid it onto her left hand. "There," he said. "Now it's official. You're stuck with me. And you're stuck with the most difficult woman in Wyoming territory. Wouldn't have it any other way." When he kissed her, it tasted like spring and new beginnings and choices made freely despite fear. Clara kissed him back, feeling the last of her defenses finally crumble, replaced by something stronger. Not the absence of fear, but the courage to move forward anyway. They set the wedding for June, giving Clara time to adjust to the idea of becoming someone's wife, and giving the town time to organize what promised to be the social event of the season, Mrs. Chen took charge of the dress with barely concealed glee, and Sarah Brennan volunteered to handle flowers from her garden. The whole town seemed invested in making sure Clara Hayes' wedding was memorable. But the weeks leading up to the ceremony tested Clara's resolve in ways she hadn't anticipated, not through dramatic crisis or external threats, but through the small, constant adjustments of merging two independent lives into one shared existence. Ethan started spending more evenings at the store, helping with closing procedures and walking Clara home rather than riding back to his ranch. It was practical and thoughtful, and made her feel simultaneously protected and suffocated. She found herself snapping at him over trivial things, pushing back against help she didn't need just to prove she could. "Clara, I'm just trying to lock the door," Ethan said with strained patience one evening after she'd snatched the key from his hand. "I know how to lock my own door." "Never said you didn't, but we're getting married in 3 weeks. Eventually, it'll be our door, our store, our life. Thought we could start practicing the our part." "I'm not ready for that yet." She heard the childishness in her own voice, hated it, couldn't stop it. I don't know, space, time, something." Ethan studied her face, reading the fear she couldn't hide. "You're panicking." "I'm not." "You are. And that's fine. Normal, even. But Clara, if you're having second thoughts, I need to know now, before we stand up in front of everyone and make promises we might not keep." The question hung between them, honest and painful. Clara looked at this man who knew her better than anyone, who saw through her defenses but didn't use that knowledge as a weapon, and felt the panic recede slightly. "I'm not having second thoughts about you," she said quietly. "I'm having second thoughts about me, about whether I'm capable of being what a wife should be." "And what's that?" "I don't know, softer, more accommodating, less argumentative?" She gestured helplessly. "Every marriage I've seen, the woman changes to fit the man. Even good marriages. The wife adjusts her dreams, her habits, her entire life to support his. And I'm terrified that's going to happen to us no matter how much we try to prevent it." Ethan was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke, his voice carried unusual intensity. "My mother once told me something I didn't fully understand until I met you. She said marriage to my father wasn't about becoming half a person to make a whole. It was about 2 whole people choosing to build something bigger together. They fought like hell sometimes, disagreed on everything from ranch management to how to raise me, but they never stopped being themselves, never diminished each other to avoid conflict." "How?" "By respecting that different didn't mean wrong, by compromising on actions while honoring feelings, by remembering that partnership meant working toward shared goals, not forcing one person to adopt the other's vision." He moved closer, his voice gentling. "Clara, I'm not asking you to become someone else. I'm asking you to stay exactly who you are while letting me do the same. And yes, we'll have to adjust and compromise and figure out how 2 stubborn people share one life. But that's negotiation, not surrender. What if I'm terrible at negotiation? Then we'll be terrible at it together." He smiled, sad and hopeful at once. "I'm not expecting perfection, Clara. I'm expecting effort, real, honest, sometimes messy effort to build something neither of us has seen before. A marriage between equals who don't always agree but always respect each other enough to find common ground." Clara felt something loosen in her chest. "Can we practice? Before the wedding? Try living as partners so I know I can do it?" "We've been practicing for months. The store, the business decisions, the way we handle problems together, that's all been practice." Ethan caught her hands. "But if you need more time before making it official, I'll wait. Another month? Another year? Whatever you need." "No." The word came out firm, surprising them both. "No, I don't need more time. I need to stop letting fear make my decisions. I need to choose trust, even when it's terrifying." She squeezed his hands. "I'm going to marry you in 3 weeks, Ethan Cole. And I'm probably going to panic again before then, and you're going to have to talk me down. But I'm not running." "Good." He pulled her close. "Because I'm all out of patience for chasing, ready to start the part where we just live together." The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of preparations and last-minute anxieties. Clara threw herself into wedding planning with the same intensity she brought to business, treating it like a project to be managed rather than a celebration to be enjoyed. She drove Mrs. Chen to distraction with alterations and re-alterations to the dress, changed the menu 3 times, and nearly called off the whole thing when the flowers Sarah ordered weren't the exact shade she'd requested. It was Ethan who finally pulled her aside 2 days before the ceremony, his expression a mix of amusement and concern. "Clara, you're planning this wedding like it's a military campaign. I just want everything perfect." "Why? Who are you trying to impress?" The question stopped her cold. Who was she trying to impress? The town that had doubted her, herself? The ghost of her mother who'd never gotten the marriage she deserved? "I don't know," she admitted.
I just feel like if everything's perfect on the outside, maybe I won't notice how terrified I am on the inside. How about instead of perfect, we aim for real? Ethan's voice was gentle. Real flowers that might not be exactly the right shade. Real food that people will actually eat instead of admire. A real ceremony that's about us making promises, not performing for an audience. I don't know how to do real, Clara's voice cracked. I only know how to do controlled and perfect and safe.
Then let's practice. He took her hand, leading her toward the door. Come on. Where are we going?
Somewhere real. He took her to the meadow where his parents were buried, a quiet spot overlooking the valley with wildflowers growing unchecked and wind singing through prairie grass. They sat on a fallen log, and Ethan began talking about his childhood, about parents who'd loved fiercely but never quietly, who'd fought and reconciled and taught him that disagreement wasn't disaster.
They scared me sometimes, he admitted, the intensity of how they felt about everything. But they also showed me what commitment looks like when it's real instead of polite. They didn't hide their conflicts or pretend everything was fine when it wasn't. They worked through things, sometimes loudly, always honestly. Did they ever regret marrying each other? I asked my mother that once, after a particularly bad fight with my father about whether to expand the ranch. She said regret was a word for people who settled for less than they deserved. That real partnership meant fighting for what you wanted while respecting what the other person needed. Ethan's voice softened with memory. She told me the goal wasn't avoiding conflict. It was making sure conflict brought you closer instead of pushing you apart. Clara leaned against him, watching clouds drift across endless sky. I want that. The real thing. Even if it's messy and difficult and nothing like what I imagined marriage should be. What did you imagine? I don't know anymore. Maybe nothing. Maybe I was so busy fearing it, I never let myself imagine it could be good. She turned to face him. But I'm imagining now. Us in that store arguing about inventory. Us at your ranch debating cattle versus crops. Us 20 years from now, still stubborn, still fighting, still choosing each other. I can see that too.
Ethan's thumb traced circles on her palm. And Clara? I'm not scared of your anger or your stubbornness or your need to control everything. Those are parts of what make you strong. What scares me is the thought that you might hide those parts to become some idea of what a wife should be. I won't. I can't. Don't know how to be anyone but myself. Then don't learn. He kissed her forehead. Stay impossible. Stay fierce. Stay Clara. That's all I'm asking. The wedding day dawned clear and warm, the kind of perfect June morning that felt designed for new beginnings. Clara woke before sunrise, too nervous to sleep, and spent the quiet hours reviewing her decision from every angle one final time. She was marrying Ethan Cole, becoming his wife, linking her life permanently to another person's, and trusting that the connection would strengthen rather than diminish her. It should have terrified her. Instead, she felt almost calm. Not the absence of fear, but the presence of something stronger, certainty that she was making the right choice for the right reasons. Mrs. Chen arrived at dawn to help with preparations, chattering excitedly while arranging Clara's hair and adjusting the simple white dress they'd created together. It wasn't elaborate or fashionable, but it was Clara, clean lines, practical fabric, beautiful in its simplicity. Your mother would be so proud, Mrs. Chen said, pinning the final flower into Clara's hair. To see you here, successful and strong, and choosing love without losing yourself. You think she'd approve of Ethan? I think she'd be jealous you found him first. The seamstress smiled through sudden tears. Now stop fidgeting. You're getting married in an hour, and we need to make you look less like you're about to negotiate a business deal and more like a bride. What's the difference? Absolutely nothing, knowing you. The ceremony took place in the meadow Ethan had shown her, with wildflowers blooming and half of Willow Ridge in attendance. Clara walked toward her future with steady steps. No hesitation, no backward glances. Ethan waited at the makeshift altar wearing his best suit and an expression of such open love it made her chest tight. Sheriff Warner officiated, keeping the words simple and true. When it came time for vows, Clara spoke the promises she'd spent weeks perfecting, then abandoned them entirely. I can't promise to be a perfect wife, she said, her voice carrying across the meadow. Can't promise I won't fight with you or challenge you or make your life difficult sometimes.
But I can promise to be your partner in everything, success and failure, joy and grief, all of it. I promise to trust you even when fear tells me not to let you help without treating it like weakness, to build something with you that neither of us could create alone. Ethan's vows were simpler. I promise to see you, really see you, not some ideal version, but the real, complicated, magnificent woman standing here. I promise to support your dreams even when they're different from mine, to stand beside you, not in front of you, to love you exactly as you are today and every day after. When Sheriff Warner pronounced them married, the kiss that sealed it felt like every promise they'd ever made to each other distilled into a single moment. Clara kissed her husband and felt not loss of self, but expansion, two whole people becoming something stronger together. The celebration lasted into the evening, with food and music and dancing under stars that seemed closer than usual. Clara found herself pulled into conversation after conversation, accepting congratulations from people who doubted her, questioned her choices, whispered about her stubbornness. They all seemed genuinely happy now, eager to claim credit for bringing this match about. But it was Mrs. Chen's quiet words that stayed with her, whispered while the party continued around them. You did it. Chose love without losing yourself. Your mother would be so proud. I'm still scared sometimes, Clara admitted. Good. Fear means you're paying attention, means you care enough to want to get it right. The seamstress squeezed her hand. But don't let it become your compass again. You've got something better now, partnership with someone who won't let you disappear. As the evening deepened and guests began departing, Ethan found Clara standing at the meadow's edge, looking out over the valley that held both their futures. Tired? He asked. Exhausted, but good exhausted. She leaned into him, feeling the solid warmth that was already becoming familiar. Did we really just do that? Get married in front of everyone, make promises we're going to have to keep? We did. And Clara? He turned her to face him. We're going to keep them. Not because it'll always be easy, but because we chose each other knowing it wouldn't be. Because we want the real thing, messiness and all. Together? Together. He kissed her softly. Always together. That's the promise that matters most. They walked back toward their future hand in hand, two stubborn souls who'd fought their way through fear and doubt and the weight of painful histories to choose something neither had quite believed in before. Love as partnership, strength found in vulnerability, freedom discovered through commitment. Clara touched the ring now firmly settled on her left hand and felt its weight differently than she had on her right. Not as burden or obligation, but as symbol of choice freely made. She'd spent so long equating independence with isolation, convinced that needing anyone made her weak. But standing beside Ethan under stars that blessed their union, Clara understood what everyone had been trying to tell her all along. True strength wasn't refusing all help. True freedom wasn't standing alone. True independence wasn't rejecting love to avoid pain. Real strength was having the courage to be vulnerable with someone worthy of that trust. Real freedom was choosing your own path, even when it led you toward commitment. Real independence was knowing you could stand alone but choosing not to, because something better waited in partnership. Clara Hayes had refused love for so long, certain it would diminish her. But in finally accepting it, accepting him, she discovered something her mother never had the chance to learn. The right love didn't make you smaller. It made you brave enough to become everything you were meant to be. The first test of their marriage came not with dramatic crisis, but with the mundane reality of two strong-willed people learning to share space. Ethan moved into the apartment above the trading post 3 days after the wedding, bringing his belongings in a single wagon load that somehow felt like an invasion of Clara's carefully ordered world. She watched him unpack, fighting the urge to dictate where everything should go, biting back comments about his boots by the door and his coat on her chair and his presence filling spaces that had been hers alone for 26 years. You're doing it again, Ethan said without looking up from the trunk he was unpacking. Doing what? Planning how to rearrange everything the moment I leave the room. He held up a worn leather journal. Where should this go? Clara wanted to say the shelf by the window, the one she'd kept empty specifically for her father's old journals. Wanted to maintain that space as shrine to what had been rather than making room for what was becoming. But she caught herself, recognizing the impulse for what it was, another way of holding on to independence by refusing to truly merge their lives. Wherever you want, she said, and meant it. It's your home too now.
Our home. He set the journal on the shelf, right where she would have placed her father's things, and somehow it felt right instead of wrong. We're going to step on each other's toes for a while. That's normal. But Clara, I need you to tell me when I'm overstepping instead of just resenting it silently. What if I don't know the difference between normal adjustment and losing myself? Then we figure it out together. But you've got to talk to me. Ethan crossed to where she stood by the window, his hands settling on her shoulders. I can't read your mind, can't fix problems I don't know exist. Partnership means communication, even when it's uncomfortable. The next weeks proved him right. They fought about trivial things, how to arrange the kitchen, whether to keep the store open later, whose turn it was to handle difficult customers. But they also learned each other's rhythms, discovered compromise wasn't surrender, found that disagreement didn't have to mean disaster. Clara was working inventory one morning when Ethan came down from their apartment with a proposition that made her stomach clench. I've been thinking about expanding, he said, spreading plans across the counter. The store's doing well. We've got capital now. And there's that empty building next to Pritchard's old place. What if we bought it, turned it into a proper freight office, centralize operations, hire help, maybe even start running regular routes to Denver and beyond? Clara stared at the plans, seeing opportunity war with terror. Expansion meant growth, success, building something bigger than what her grandfather had dreamed. It also meant more risk, more investment, more dependence on systems beyond her control. That's a lot of money, she said carefully. It is, but we've got it, and the return on investment could be substantial. 3 years and we'd own the freight routes for this entire region. Ethan's voice carried the enthusiasm of someone seeing possibilities rather than pitfalls. We'd be building an empire, Clara, not just surviving, but thriving. And if it fails, then we'd still have the store. This is expansion, not replacement. But Clara, he leaned against the counter, reading her face. You're not worried about the money. You're worried about what success means. Success means more to lose. Success also means more to build. More security, more opportunity, more of a future to leave our children someday. He said it casually, but Clara caught the weight behind the words. Children. She tested the word, finding it strange and terrifying. We've never talked about that. I know. Didn't want to pressure you when you were still adjusting to having a husband. Ethan's voice was gentle. But yeah, I want children. Want to build something that outlasts us. Want to teach them how to be strong and stubborn and better than we were. Don't you? Clara thought about it, really thought about it for the first time. She'd been so focused on survival and independence that she'd never let herself imagine a future that included children. But now, standing in a store that was finally thriving, married to a man who'd proven he wouldn't diminish her, she could see it. Could imagine teaching a daughter the business, watching a son learn ranching from Ethan, building a legacy that was about more than just proving she could survive alone. I'm terrified of being a mother, she admitted. Terrified I'll repeat my parents' mistakes, that I'll be too controlling like Papa or too weak like Mama, that I'll damage some innocent child by not knowing how to balance strength with softness. Then we'll figure it out together. Make new mistakes instead of repeating old ones. He pulled her close. But Clara, if you don't want children, if that's not part of your vision for our life, I need to know. I married you, not some imagined version of what our family could be. If it's just us forever, that's enough. She heard the truth in his words, felt the sincerity of his willingness to adapt, and realized that was exactly what made him safe to build a future with. His insistence that she stay herself even as they created something new together. Ask me again in a year, she said, after we've survived being married that long. After I've proven to myself that I can be someone's wife without losing who I am. Then we can talk about adding someone else to the mix. Fair enough? He kissed her forehead. But what about the expansion? The freight office? Clara looked at the plans again, seeing them differently now. Not as threat to her control, but as opportunity to build something neither of them could achieve alone. Ethan had the connections and the knowledge of freight operations. She had the business acumen and the relationships with customers who'd need reliable shipping. Together, they could create something that served the entire county while securing their own future. Yes, she said, and felt the words settle into certainty. Let's do it. Let's build an empire. The freight office opened that fall.
a modest operation that quickly grew beyond their projections. Ethan hired 2 reliable men to handle routes while he managed logistics and negotiations. Clara coordinated with store customers, ensuring seamless integration between retail and shipping. Within 6 months, Hayes Coal Freight was handling shipments for every major business in the county, undercutting larger operations through efficiency and personal service. Their success drew attention beyond Willow Ridge. Business owners from Denver came calling, interested in partnerships. Suppliers who'd once been wary extended better terms. The trading post expanded again, taking over the space that had been Pritchard's store, and Clara found herself managing a staff of 4 instead of working alone. It was overwhelming and exhilarating, and nothing like what she'd imagined when she'd stood behind her father's counter, swearing she'd never need anyone. The real test came in their second winter together, when a massive blizzard shut down the territory for 3 weeks. Supply lines collapsed, roads became impassable, and Willow Ridge found itself running dangerously low on essentials. Families with limited supplies began to panic, and the pressure fell on Hayes' trading post to somehow provide what couldn't be delivered. Clara stood in the store one brutal morning, inventory lists showing numbers that wouldn't stretch far enough, and felt the old fear rising. She was going to fail. People were counting on her, and she didn't have enough stock to meet demand. The store her grandfather built, the business she'd fought so hard to save, was going to fail because she'd expanded too ambitiously and left herself vulnerable to circumstances beyond control. She was still spiraling when Ethan came in from checking the roads, his face grim with cold. Routes are completely blocked. Nothing's getting through from Denver for at least another week, maybe 2. He saw her face and crossed to her immediately. Clara, what's wrong? We're going to run out. Food, medicine, lamp oil. We've got maybe 5 days of supplies if everyone rations carefully. And they won't ration. People panic in situations like this, buy more than they need because they're afraid. We're going to run out and people are going to suffer, and it's my fault for not keeping larger reserves. This isn't your fault. Nobody predicted a storm this bad. I should have prepared better, should have maintained bigger stockpiles like Papa always did instead of running lean to maximize profit. Should have… Stop! Ethan's voice cut through her spiral. This isn't about should-haves. This is about what we do now. And Clara, we're not doing this alone. We've got a whole town full of people with skills and resources. Let's use them. He called an emergency town meeting that afternoon, gathering everyone who could make it through the snow. Standing in the cramped trading post with worried faces surrounding them, Ethan laid out the situation with characteristic bluntness. We've got limited supplies and no way to get more until the road's clear. We can either panic and create shortages through hoarding, or we can work together and make sure everyone has enough. He gestured to Clara. My wife's been doing inventory. She knows exactly what we have and what we need. If everyone's willing to pool resources and ration fairly, we can get through this without anyone going hungry or cold. Why should we trust Clara Hayes to distribute fairly? The question came from Tom Phillips, still bitter about his farming equipment debacle. How do we know she won't save the best supplies for herself and her favorites? Clara felt anger flash hot, ready to defend herself, but Ethan's hand on her arm stopped her. Because she spent the last 2 years proving her integrity, he said quietly. Because she's given this community personalized service that put her own profits second. Because she's earned trust through action, not promises. But if you'd rather handle distribution yourself, Tom, you're welcome to take responsibility for making sure every family gets their fair share while keeping accurate records and managing complaints. Phillips backed down, as Ethan had known he would. Nobody wanted the burden of making life-or-death decisions about rationing. The meeting evolved into a community effort that surprised Clara with its generosity. Families with extra supplies volunteered them for the common pool. Men offered to break trails to outlying ranches to check on isolated families. Women organized meal shares to stretch food supplies. The doctor volunteered to make house calls to conserve medicine by treating people where they were, instead of having them trek through dangerous weather. By evening, they had a system in place. Clara would maintain central inventory and manage daily distributions. A committee of 5 respected community members would handle disputes and make decisions about emergency needs. Everyone would receive exactly what they required, no more, no less, and the wealthy would pay slightly more to subsidize families who couldn't afford even rationed prices. It was socialism in miniature, this temporary community of shared resources and mutual dependence, and it worked beautifully. Over the next 2 weeks, Clara discovered something she'd never expected. Leadership wasn't about having all the answers. It was about creating systems where people could contribute their own solutions. She coordinated, facilitated, managed logistics, but the community sustained itself through collective effort. When the roads finally cleared and supply lines reopened, Willow Ridge had not only survived but grown closer. People who'd been strangers became neighbors. Families who'd competed became collaborators. And Clara, who'd spent her whole life proving she could stand alone, learned that real strength sometimes meant knowing when to ask for help and how to accept it gracefully. The experience changed how she ran both the store and the freight business. She hired more staff, delegated responsibilities she'd been hoarding, created systems that didn't require her personal involvement in every decision. It felt like giving up control at first, but gradually she realized it was actually multiplying her effectiveness. By trusting others with specific tasks, she freed herself to focus on strategy and growth rather than drowning in daily minutiae. Ethan watched the transformation with quiet satisfaction, never saying, "I told you so," but occasionally reminding her that partnership wasn't just about the two of them. "You're building community, not just business," he said one evening as they reviewed expansion plans. "That's what makes this sustainable. People don't just buy from you. They invest in you because they know you invest in them." "When did I become someone who cares about community?" Clara asked with mock horror. "You always cared. You just had to stop seeing care as weakness." He pulled her away from the paperwork, leading her to the window where twilight painted the street in shades of gold. "Look at what you've built, Clara. Not just a store or a freight company, but something that serves this whole town. Your grandfather would be proud. Your father would be amazed. And your mother—" His voice softened. "Your mother would be grateful that you found a way to be strong without being alone." Clara leaned against him, looking out at the town that had become hers through years of struggle and compromise and finally acceptance. "I almost ruined this, you know. Almost pushed you away. Almost refused help until it was too late. Almost let pride cost me everything. Almost doesn't count. What counts is that you chose differently." Ethan's arms wrapped around her, solid and steady. "You chose trust, chose partnership, chose to believe that love could make you stronger instead of weaker. That takes more courage than going it alone ever did." Spring came again, marking a year since their wedding and 2 years since Thomas Hayes' death. Clara stood in the trading post that bore her grandfather's name and her sweat and Ethan's faith, and marveled at how completely her life had transformed. The store was thriving, the freight business expanding, their reputation solid. They'd survived winter storms and supply shortages, and the 1,000 small challenges of building something from nothing. And through it all, Clara had remained herself, stubborn, fierce, determined, while somehow also becoming part of something larger. She was contemplating this transformation when Mrs. Chen arrived with a knowing smile and a direct question. "So, a year married. When are you giving this town something to gossip about besides your business success?" Clara felt heat rise in her cheeks. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Children, girl, when are you and Ethan going to start filling that apartment with the sound of little feet?" The seamstress's eyes were sharp. "You said a year. Years passed. Time to stop hiding behind work and start building the future you're both clearly ready for." "What makes you think we're ready?" "Because you stopped looking terrified every time someone mentions family. Because I see how you watch the Morrison children when they come in with their mother. Because Ethan's been talking to John about converting that back storage room into a nursery, and don't think I haven't noticed." Clara's heart skipped. "He's been planning a nursery? For 6 months now. Didn't want to pressure you, but the man's ready to be a father. Question is whether you're ready to be a mother." Mrs. Chen's expression softened. "And Clara, before you spiral into all the ways you might fail, you're going to be magnificent, stubborn and overprotective and probably too demanding of your children's independence, but magnificent, just like your mother would have been if life had given her the chance." After Mrs. Chen left, Clara climbed the stairs to their apartment with a heart full of questions and possibilities. She found Ethan reviewing freight schedules at their small table, his concentration absolute until she cleared her throat. "Mrs. Chen says you've been planning a nursery." Ethan looked up, guilt and hope mixing on his face. "She talks too much. She talks exactly enough. Clara sat across from him.
Why didn't you tell me?
Because a year ago you asked me to wait a year before discussing children. I was waiting. He set aside his papers, giving her full attention. But yeah, I've been thinking about it, preparing, hoping that when you were ready, we'd have somewhere to put a baby that wasn't just a corner of our bedroom. And you think I'm ready? I think you're terrified, which is the same thing. He reached across the table, catching her hand. But Clara, you're ready. You've proven you can share your life without losing yourself. You've built a business that doesn't consume every waking moment. You've learned to trust and delegate and ask for help. Those are exactly the skills you need to be a parent. What if I'm too controlling? What if I try to make our child into some perfect version instead of letting them be themselves? Then I'll remind you that you hated it when people tried to tell you who to be, and you'll adjust. Ethan's voice was calm, certain. Clara, you're not going to be a perfect mother. Neither am I going to be a perfect father. But we're going to be real ones. Present, committed, willing to make mistakes and learn from them. That's all any child really needs. Clara thought about her mother, who'd loved fiercely, but been too worn down to fight for herself. Thought about her father, who'd meant well but been too consumed by his own demons to be the parent she needed. Thought about the child she might raise, stubborn like her, steady like Ethan, hopefully better than both of them. Okay, she said quietly. Okay? Okay, let's have a baby. Let's build that nursery and figure out how to be parents and add someone else to this partnership we've been building. She squeezed his hand, feeling fear and excitement in equal measure. But Ethan, I need you to promise something. Anything. Promise that if I start losing myself to motherhood the way Mama did to marriage, you'll tell me. Promise you'll make sure I stay Clara, not just someone's mother or wife. Promise we'll raise our children to be their own people, not extensions of us or reflections of what we wish we'd been. I promise all of that. But Clara, I don't think you could stop being yourself if you tried. It's too fundamental to who you are. He stood, pulling her up and into his arms. You're going to be amazing at this. Probably drive our kids crazy with your high expectations and refusal to let them quit when things get hard. But you're going to love them so fiercely they'll never doubt they're valued. How do you know? Because that's how you love everything. Fiercely, completely, with standards so high they inspire people to be better than they thought possible. He kissed her softly. Our children are going to be so lucky to have you as their mother. Their daughter was born the following winter, arriving during a snowstorm that seemed appropriate for a child destined to be as stubborn as her mother. Clara labored for 18 hours, fighting every step, refusing laudanum even when the pain became unbearable. Ethan stayed beside her the entire time, his hand crushed in hers, his voice steady with encouragement even when fear flickered in his eyes. When the baby finally arrived, small and red-faced and screaming with magnificent fury, Clara felt something shift fundamentally inside her. This tiny person, half her and half Ethan, and entirely herself, was completely dependent and completely individual all at once. She's perfect, Ethan whispered, his voice thick with emotion. Clara, she's perfect. She's angry, Clara corrected, watching their daughter's face scrunch with indignation. Good, she'll need that. They named her Rose, after Clara's mother, and watching Ethan cradle their daughter with such gentle certainty, Clara understood what her father had been trying to tell her before he died. This was what real love looked like. Not one person diminishing to make room for another, but both people expanding to accommodate someone new while remaining fundamentally themselves. Motherhood was harder than Clara had imagined, and different than she'd feared. She didn't lose herself in it, but she did discover parts of herself she hadn't known existed, a tenderness she'd always suppressed, a patience she'd never needed before, a fierce protectiveness that made her earlier independence look like casual indifference. She learned to delegate more at the store, trusting her staff to handle daily operations while she split time between business and baby. Ethan took on more of the freight management, discovering he was better at the logistics than he'd realized. They traded responsibilities fluidly, one picking up when the other was overwhelmed, neither keeping score or demanding credit. It wasn't perfect. Rose was colicky and demanding, crying for hours regardless of what they tried. Clara was exhausted and overwhelmed, sometimes snapping at Ethan when he was only trying to help. Ethan occasionally retreated to the freight office when the crying became too much,
leaving Clara feeling abandoned even though she knew he'd return. But they worked through it, talked about frustrations instead of letting them fester, asked for help from Mrs. Chen and other mothers who'd survived infancy, remembered that partnership meant taking turns being strong, and that vulnerability wasn't weakness when shared with someone trustworthy. Rose was 6 months old when Clara realized she was pregnant again. The news brought mixed feelings, joy that they'd be expanding their family, terror that she couldn't possibly handle 2 children while running businesses that still demanded her attention. "We'll figure it out," Ethan said with the calm certainty that had become his trademark. "Same way we figured out everything else. Together, imperfectly, but successfully." Their son was born the following fall, arriving quickly and quietly, as if apologizing for the inconvenience. They named him Thomas, after Claire's father, and the old man would have been proud to see his name carried by a child born into love instead of dysfunction. The years that followed blurred together in the beautiful chaos of building both family and empire. The trading post expanded again, taking over adjacent buildings until Hayes Trading became the largest retail operation between Denver and Cheyenne. The freight business grew to employ 15 men running routes across 3 territories. Ethan's ranch, which he'd never fully abandoned, became a teaching ground where Thomas learned cattle management and Rose proved to have an unexpected gift for training horses. Clara discovered that her children were nothing like her and exactly like her all at once. Rose had her stubbornness, but Ethan's calm, refusing to be rushed or pressured into anything she hadn't decided for herself. Thomas had his father's steady temperament, but his mother's fierce intelligence, absorbing business principles before he could properly read. She taught them both that strength came in many forms, in knowing when to stand firm and when to bend, when to fight alone and when to ask for help, when to protect your independence and when to embrace interdependence. She taught them that love wasn't weakness if you chose the right person to love, that partnership wasn't surrender if both people remained whole, that family could make you stronger instead of smaller if you refused to let it define your entire existence. And through teaching them, Clara continued learning herself. She watched Rose struggle with wanting to please everyone while maintaining her own identity, and recognized her younger self in that conflict. She watched Thomas navigate the expectations of being a Hayes and a Cole, carrying 2 legacies while trying to forge his own path, and understood the weight of inheritance differently. She learned to let them fail sometimes, resisting the urge to fix everything, remembering how much she'd grown from her own struggles. She learned to celebrate their victories without claiming credit, to support their dreams even when they differed from her vision, to love them fiercely without suffocating them with that love. It was the hardest work she'd ever done, this business of being a mother. Harder than saving a failing store, harder than building a freight empire, harder than learning to trust and love and be vulnerable. But it was also the most rewarding, watching these 2 people grow into their own magnificent selves while carrying pieces of her and Ethan forward into futures they'd create for themselves. By the time Rose turned 15 and Thomas 13, Hayes Trading had become Hayes & Cole Enterprises, a business empire that included retail, freight, and now warehousing operations across the territory. Clara and Ethan had built something that employed half the town, served the entire county, and would outlast them both. But the real legacy wasn't the business. It was the proof that 2 stubborn people could build something extraordinary together without either losing themselves in the process. Clara stood in the original trading post one evening, now the flagship store of their small empire, and marveled at how far she'd come from the terrified young woman who'd once pointed a rifle at Ethan Cole and swore she'd never need anyone. She'd been so certain that love meant surrender, that partnership meant diminishment, that accepting help meant admitting weakness. She'd been wrong about all of it. Love hadn't made her weak. It had made her brave enough to be vulnerable. Partnership hadn't diminished her. It had multiplied what she could achieve. Accepting help hadn't been admission of failure. It had been recognition that some things were bigger than what one person could carry alone. Ethan found her there, his hair now silver-touched and his face lined with years of work and worry and joy. He was still the steady presence he'd always been, still patient, still certain, still looking at her like she was worth waiting for. "Thinking about the early days?" he asked, sliding an arm around her waist. "Thinking about how hard I fought against this, against you, against us, against everything we've become." She leaned into him, fitting perfectly after all these years. "I was so scared of losing myself that I almost threw away the best thing that ever happened to me. But you didn't. You chose differently." Ethan kissed her temple.
That's what matters. Not how long it took to decide, but that you decided right. Through the window, they could see Rose helping a customer with customary efficiency while Thomas handled the freight schedule, both of them carrying forward the legacy their parents had built from stubbornness and trust and refusal to give up on each other. "We did good," Clara said softly. "Built something worth remembering." "We did better than good. We built something real." Ethan turned her to face him, his creekwater eyes still steady after all these years. "Thank you for letting me prove you wrong, for giving me the chance to show you that love could make you stronger instead of weaker. Thank you for being patient enough to wait for me to figure it out, for proving every day that partnership doesn't mean surrender." Clara touched his face, tracing lines earned through years of standing beside her. "For showing me what my mother deserved and never got, real love from someone worthy of it." They stood together in the store that had survived so much: Claire's determination, Thomas's death, Pritchard's sabotage, winter storms and summer droughts, and all the challenges of building something from nothing. The building that had witnessed Claire's transformation from a woman who believed she had to stand alone to one who understood that choosing to stand beside someone was the bravest choice of all. Outside, the Wyoming wind still carried dust and judgment in equal measure through Willow Ridge. But inside Hayes' trading post, surrounded by evidence of what two people could build through partnership and trust and stubborn refusal to give up, Clara Hayes Cole felt something she'd never expected to feel. Peace. Not the peace of having no challenges, life would always bring those, but the peace of knowing she didn't have to face them alone, of having a partner who'd proven over years and through countless tests that he meant every promise he'd ever made, of having built a legacy that proved love didn't have to mean loss, that strength could be found in vulnerability, that the bravest thing a fiercely independent woman could do was choose to be interdependent with someone worthy of that trust. Claire had spent her life believing that to survive she had to stand alone, that to be strong she had to need no one, that to protect herself she had to refuse all help, resist all love, maintain perfect independence regardless of cost. She'd been spectacularly, magnificently wrong. Real survival wasn't about going it alone. It was about building connections strong enough to weather any storm. Real strength wasn't about needing no one. It was about choosing who to need and trusting them not to use that need as a weapon. Real protection wasn't about isolation. It was about creating partnerships where vulnerability became power instead of liability. In the harsh frontier, Clara Hayes had done more than survive. She'd thrived, building an empire and a family and a legacy that would outlast her. Not by standing alone, but by finally accepting that the right person wouldn't make her smaller. The right person, patient, steady, certain Ethan Cole, had made her braver, stronger, more fully herself than she'd ever been in isolation. And that, Clara understood now, was what love was supposed to be. Not one person eclipsing another, but two people becoming brighter together than either could shine alone. Not surrender or weakness or loss of self, but partnership freely chosen and fiercely protected by two people stubborn enough to make it work. She'd refused love for so long, terrified it would destroy her the way it had destroyed her mother. But in finally accepting it, accepting him, Claire had discovered something that would have changed everything if she'd learned it sooner. The right love didn't diminish you. It didn't make you weak or small or less than you were. The right love set you free to become everything you were meant to be. And Clara Hayes Cole, standing beside the man who'd waited 3 years for her to understand that truth, had finally become exactly who she was meant to be all along. Not a woman who stood alone, but a woman strong enough to choose partnership. Not a survivor who refused all help, but a builder who understood that some legacies required more than one pair of hands. She'd rewritten what strength meant, redefined what independence looked like, proved that a fierce woman and a patient man could build something neither could create alone. In the harsh frontier town of Willow Ridge, Clara Hayes had done the impossible. She'd survived, she'd thrived, and she'd done it not by standing alone, but by finally accepting that the bravest thing she could do was stand beside someone who deserved to be there. That was the legacy that would outlast them both. Not the business empire or the wealth accumulated, but the proof that love could make you stronger if you were brave enough to choose it. That partnership could expand rather than diminish if both people remained whole. That the strongest woman in Wyoming territory had become even stronger by admitting she didn't have to carry everything alone. The woman who'd once refused love had finally understood its true power. And in that understanding, Clara Hayes Cole had found not just survival, but something far more precious. She'd found freedom. She'd found strength. She'd found herself. And she'd found it all by finally accepting the hand Ethan Cole had been offering from the very beginning, the hand of a partner who would never ask her to be anything less than exactly who she was.